Hi guys, and welcome to Quiet History Vault. Tonight we step softly into a winter that does not care about comfort convenience, or your very modern belief that cold weather is mostly a sweater problem. Snow presses against the crooked village roofs, smoke leaks through thatch. Somewhere in the dark a cow complains like it has read the forecast and found it personally offensive. You stand at the edge of a medieval settlement, breath-turning silver boots sinking into frozen mud. And yes, just to be honest, early you probably won't survive this without central heating, antibiotics, and the emotional support of a microwave. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, tell us where you're listening from and what the local time is outside your window. Now dim the lights and let the cold come close, but only in the imagination. You arrive just as the first hard frost settles over the fields. It is not the pretty frost of greeting cards. It is the kind that stiffens grass into little blades, seals puddles under dull glass, and turns every morning chore into a small negotiation with misery. The village is quiet but not peaceful. Quiet here means people are saving energy. Even the dogs bark less, as though sound itself might cost calories. You pull your cloak tighter. It smells of damp wool, wood smoke, and old sweat. Nothing in this world is truly dry for long. The air creeps through seams under hems, around wrists, down the back of your neck, with the confidence of a tax collector. The cold is not a dramatic event. It is a roommate. It moves in, touches everything, and refuses to leave until spring has argued with it for weeks. Around you, the village has been preparing for this since harvest. Medieval life does not separate seasons into vibes. Autumn is not pumpkin spice and soft scarves. Autumn is the tense countdown before the ground hardens and the roads become treacherous. Grain has been threshed, ale brewed, animals counted, tools repaired as much as they can be. Everyone knows winter will ask the same question again and again. Did you store enough? The answer is usually well, perhaps. You pass low houses clustered near the church, each built from local materials: timber, wattle, daub, thatch, clay, whatever the region gives and whatever poverty allows. Smoke curls from roof holes or rough chimneys, if the household is lucky enough to have one. A mainstream fact worth remembering is that most medieval Europeans lived in rural villages, not castles, and their winters were shaped far more by fields animals and food stores than by knights in polished armour. The castle may dominate the skyline, but the peasant hearth dominates survival. The earth beneath you is ridged from ploughing hard, now under frost. Beyond the houses, strips of field lie silent. No golden wheat, no waving barley, no cheerful productivity. Just stubble-bare trees, hedges and crows, hopping about with the grim professionalism of creatures that know winter well. You hear them calling from the branches, rough and amused, as if they have seen many people try to outlast February and are not impressed. Inside one doorway a woman shakes ash from a pot. She moves slowly but not lazily. In winter, quick movements waste warmth unless something is burning, spilling, or about to escape. A child peers around her skirt, cheeks red, nose, running eyes wide at the stranger you have become in this imagined night. The child has no concept of snow days as a charming break from school. Winter is work hunger, smoke in the eyes, and the constant instruction to shut the door. You notice how early darkness comes. Not poetic twilight, not cosy evening. A heavy darkness drops over the village like a lid. Candles are precious. Rushlights smell of fat and damp plant fibre. Firewood must be gathered, cut, guarded, rationed. Light is not something you flick on without thinking. Light is labour. Warmth is labour. Supper is labour. Even sleep is arranged around survival, with bodies tucked together, animals sometimes nearby, and every blanket carrying the faint scent of the people who used it before you. And yet this world is not only suffering. That would be too simple, and history is rarely kind enough to be simple. There is rhythm here. There are jokes muttered by the hearth. There's gossip in the bakehouse. There are children sliding on frozen ruts until someone shouts at them because shoes are expensive and bones are inconvenient. There are church bells, feast days, shared tools, borrowed embers, and the deep human talent for making ordinary hardship feel somehow like life. Still, you feel the danger immediately. A bad winter is not just cold, it is a chain reaction. If the grain harvest was poor, bread becomes thin. If hay runs low, animals weaken. If animals die, spring labour suffers. If people eat the seed grain, the next year begins in trouble before the first shoots rise. A single season can lean on the next like a tired giant, and families live under that weight. A quirky little tidbit comes drifting from local memory. Some medieval people believed certain weather signs could predict the coming cold with eerie precision. The thickness of onion skins, the behaviour of geese, the timing of berries, the restlessness of pigs. Was it science? Not exactly. Was it completely useless? Also, not exactly. When your survival depends on patterns, you study everything. Even a pig having a suspiciously dramatic afternoon. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers experienced winter mainly as a season of reduced labour, or as a different kind of intense labour hidden inside the home. You can feel why the debate exists. The fields sleep, yes, but no one else does. There is grain to process cloth, to make tools, to mend animals, to feed fires, to tend children, to watch prayers, to say debts to worry over, and hunger to delay one bowl at a time. You follow the narrow lane toward the centre of the village. Frozen mud cracks underfoot. Somewhere a door opens and releases a breath of smoke and heat, then closes quickly. You smell pottage, simmering perhaps peas or beans, perhaps cabbage if the garden allowed it, perhaps mostly hope with a little salt. Your stomach answers before your manners do. Medieval winter has a way of making the body speak plainly. The church stands ahead, stone colder than the sky. Its bell tower watches over everything, keeper of time in a world without wristwatches, phone alarms, or calendar notifications gently bullying you about meetings. Here time is rung, prayed, worked, and endured. The bell calls people to worship, but also reminds them that the village is not just scattered households. It is a shared organism, fragile and stubborn. Snow begins again, soft at first. It settles on thatch, on cartwheels, on the backs of sheep on your shoulders. The flakes make the world seem quiet enough to trust which is rude, because this is exactly when winter is most dangerous. It hides the ditch, covers the ice, muffles the approaching wolf, and turns distance into a guess. You stand there cold, seeping into your bones, and begin to understand the first rule of this season. Medieval winter is not something people conquer. They bargain with it. They conserve, cooperate, complain, pray, laugh, shiver, and keep going. Survival is not heroic in the shiny sense. It is repetitive. It is smoky. It is carrying one more log, eating one more thin meal, patching one more tear, and waking before dawn because the animals cannot feed themselves. And as night closes fully over the village, you step toward the nearest doorway, toward the glow trembling behind a leather curtain, toward the crowded warmth where breath, smoke, straw, and human patience gather together against the cold. You duck through the doorway and enter the kind of warmth that is not exactly comfortable, but is still better than becoming decorative frost outside. The room receives you with smoke first. It stings your eyes, coats your tongue, and settles into your hair as if it has paid rent there. Then comes the smell of damp wool, stale straw, boiled vegetables, animal breath, old leather, and the sour human closeness of people who do not have a private bathroom, a laundry cycle, or the luxury of saying, actually, I need some personal space. The house is low and dim. Your head nearly brushes the beams. The walls are made from wattle and daub, woven sticks packed with clay straw, dung, and whatever local material works well enough to keep the weather from walking straight inside. A mainstream historical fact sits quietly in the smoke. Here many poorer medieval homes had a central hearth, rather than a separate fireplace. and smoke escaped imperfectly through a roof-opening doorway or simple chimney arrangement depending on place and period. In other words, the fire warms you while also gently seasoning your lungs. Very thoughtful. You blink until shapes become clearer. A family gathers around the hearth not because it is charming, but because heat has a small kingdom, and everyone wants citizenship. The fire is not roaring like a tavern scene in a film. It is controlled, guarded, fed carefully. Wood is work, peat is work, brushwood is work. Anything that burns has been cut, gathered, dried, carried, or stolen, with what we might call practical enthusiasm. No one wastes fuel unless they enjoy future regret. You sit on a stool near the wall. It wobbles in a way that suggests both age and personality. Underfoot is packed earth covered with rushes or straw, not fresh enough to be pleasant, not old enough to be scandalous, just somewhere in the familiar middle. The floor holds smells the way a memory holds embarrassment. Ash drifts from the hearth. A child coughs. A dog circles, sighs, and collapses near the warmest patch, having made the best decision in the household. The room is shared by everyone who belongs here, and perhaps a few creatures who never asked to be included but are very much included. Chickens may be tucked away nearby. A weak lamb might be brought indoors if it is worth saving. In some homes, especially in harsher climates or among poorer households, animals and humans share the same building, if not always the exact same room. This is not because medieval people are unaware of smells. They are extremely aware. They simply prefer smells to death. A cow produces heat. A wall between you and the cow is nice. No wall is still warmer than snow. The family does not stare at you for long. Winter leaves little energy for dramatic curiosity. A woman stirs a pot suspended over the hearth. A man repairs something by touch more than sight. Perhaps a strap, perhaps a tool handle. An older person sits close to the fire, wrapped in layers, eyes half closed but ears fully open. Children huddle together on a bench whispering until a look from an adult turns them into temporary saints. There is no separate bedroom the way you might imagine. Sleeping happens wherever space allows. Beds, if present, are valuable objects often shared. Straw pallets are common. Blankets are layered, patched, and guarded with the seriousness of family treasure. You begin to understand that privacy is one of those modern luxuries that sneaks around pretending to be a basic human condition. Here, privacy is what you get when everyone else is asleep, and even then the goat may have opinions. The heat is uneven. Your face warms while your back freezes. Your feet remain suspiciously cold no matter where you place them. Smoke rises, pools under the roof, then finds its way out, slowly leaving enough behind to remind everyone who is in charge. The thatch above is blackened inside. Soot clings to beams. Insects dislike smoke, which is one benefit, though fleas are apparently made of darker ambitions. They live in bedding clothing straw and animal hides. Small winter companions no one invited. A quirky tidbit shuffles into the room with the scratching sounds in the straw. Some medieval households used herbs such as tansy, fleabane, lavender, or rushes mixed with sweet plants to freshen floors and discourage pests. Did it turn the cottage into a spa? Absolutely not. But perhaps it made the fleas pause for a moment and think, a hostile environment. That is something. You warm your hands over the fire and notice how every object has a purpose. The pot, the spindle, the knife, the wooden bowls, the ladder, the chest, the hooks in the beam. Nothing is decorative in the modern sense unless usefulness itself becomes beauty, and in this room it does. A good pot is beautiful because it feeds people. A dry log is beautiful because it burns. A thick blanket is practically a love poem. The soundscape is intimate and constant. Fire mutters. Someone sniffs. Wool scratches against skin. A baby fusses, then settles. Wind presses at the walls and slides through gaps with the persistence of gossip. The animals shift and breathe. A stool scrapes. A spoon taps a bowl. These are winter sounds, small and repeated, the music of people trying to spend as little energy as possible while still doing everything necessary. Historians still debate how smoky medieval interiors truly were across different regions and social levels, because architecture, fuel wealth and local custom could change the experience dramatically. Still standing here with your eyes watering, you feel confident that no one is writing a glowing review called Air Quality 5 Stars. The smoke is part of life, part irritant, part preservative, part insect repellent, part invisible tax paid by the lungs. And yet there is comfort here. Not comfort as softness, but comfort as belonging. The family shares heat because heat must be shared. They share food because one pot feeds more efficiently than many. They share stories because darkness is long and silence can become heavy. Someone begins a tale low and slow about a neighbour who claimed his pig could sense storms. Someone else snorts. The older person corrects a detail. The children listen, pretending not to. You feel the social fabric of winter tightening around you. In summer, bodies scatter into fields and lanes and distant tasks. In winter, they return to the hearth. This closeness can be tender, but also exhausting. Every irritation has nowhere to go. Every cough is everyone's cough. Every fear sits in the room, visible in the way adults glance at the grain chest, the wood pile, the weather. The pot is opened and steam rolls up, carrying the scent of onions. Beans may be a scrap of bacon if fortune has visited recently. You receive a bowl. It is hot enough to make your fingers ache around the wood. The first taste is plain, smoky, earthy, and deeply welcome. No one asks whether it is your favourite. Favourite is a summer word. In winter, the best meal is the one that exists. As the fire sinks lower, people prepare for sleep without much ceremony. Cloaks become blankets. Bodies arrange themselves by warmth rank, age, need, and habit. The door is barred. The last tasks are checked. Embers are banked carefully beneath ash because tomorrow's fire should not have to begin from nothing. That small glowing heart in the hearth is guarded like a secret. You lie down on straw that crackles softly beneath you. It pricks through cloth. Something tiny moves near your ankle and you choose not to investigate. Above you, smoke darkens the rafters. Around you, the room breathes as one crowded animal. Outside, winter leans against the walls, patient and cold, while inside smoke, straw, and shared heat hold it back for one more night. Morning arrives without enthusiasm. You do not wake to sunlight pouring gently across your face. You wake because someone stirs the embers, because a child shifts and kicks your leg, because the cold has crept back in and tapped your shoulder with quiet persistence. The fire survived the night barely, and that feels like a small victory worth noticing. You sit up slowly, joints stiff from the hard ground and shared space. Around you, the household is already in motion, though no one looks particularly thrilled about it. Winter mornings are not about motivation. They're about necessity. The pot is back over the fire, and you realise quickly that this meal and many to come depend on decisions made months ago. This is where winter truly begins to show its teeth, not in the first frost, but in the long arithmetic of food. You step outside briefly, breath clouding again, and see the village in pale grey light. The fields remain silent, the hedges rimmed with frost, and the sky holding that low, heavy promise of more cold. But inside, everything turns toward food. Not feast food, not celebration food, but survival food. The kind that stretches, thins, and pretends to be more than it is. A mainstream historical fact settles in here like a weight on your shoulders. Medieval peasants relied heavily on grains such as barley, rye, and oats, often baked into coarse bread or boiled into pottage, a thick stew that formed the backbone of daily nutrition. Meat was rare for many, especially in winter, unless preserved from earlier slaughter or supplemented by occasional luck. You return to the hearth and watch as yesterday's pot is brought back to life. Pottage is not a recipe. It is a concept. Whatever is available goes in. Beans, peas, onions, cabbage, if it survived storage, perhaps a carrot or turnip, perhaps a scrap of salted pork if the household is fortunate. It is stretched with water, thickened with grain, and stirred until it becomes something that can be eaten slowly, thoughtfully, as if each spoonful deserves respect. You take a bowl again, and this time you notice how carefully everyone eats. No rushing, no careless spilling. Bread is torn, not bitten, directly to avoid crumbs falling uselessly. Even the crust, hard and stubborn, is soaked and softened, coaxed into usefulness. Hunger teaches patience in a way no lecture ever could. Before winter tightened its grip, the village worked hard to prepare. Grain was harvested, threshed, winnowed, and stored in bins or sacks guarded against damp rodents and theft. Meat from animals that could not be fed through winter was salted, smoked, or dried. Fish might be preserved in similar ways. Ale was brewed not just for enjoyment, but because it was often safer to drink than water. Everything depended on preservation, and preservation depended on knowledge passed down through generations. You begin to understand the quiet fear that sits behind every meal. Supplies must last until spring, not just until the first thaw, but until new crops grow mature and can be harvested. That gap, often called the hungry gap in later descriptions, is the shadow everyone feels even when the bowl is still half full. A curious little detail drifts into your awareness as you watch the household work. In some regions, people stored grain in large communal barns or protected pits, sometimes lined carefully to keep moisture out. There are even records suggesting that certain herbs or ashes were mixed into stored grain to deter pests, a kind of early improvised pest control that may or may not have been entirely effective. Still, when your entire future depends on a pile of grain, you try everything. You notice a chest in the corner, its lid heavy, its presence important. This is where valuable food is kept locked not necessarily against thieves from outside, but sometimes against desperate hands within. Hunger changes people slowly, then suddenly. Trust is strong, but winter tests it. Historians still debate how evenly food was distributed within medieval households, especially in harsher seasons. Some suggest that working adults, particularly men, might receive larger portions due to labour demands, while others argue that families adjusted more flexibly, protecting children and the vulnerable when possible. Sitting here watching the careful division of bread and stew, you can feel the tension between fairness and survival. The woman at the hearth sets aside a small portion, not for immediate eating, but for later. You realise that every meal is planned with the next one in mind. There is no casual snacking, no wandering to a cupboard out of boredom. Food is measured, remembered, and stretched. Even the idea of waste feels almost offensive. Outside you hear the lowing of cattle, thinner now than they were in autumn. Their fodder is limited too. Hay stored from summer must last, and every mouth, human or animal, competes in the same quiet calculation. Some animals will not make it through winter. That is understood even if it is not spoken aloud in front of the children. You finish your bowl, and though it warms you, it does not fully satisfy. That slight lingering hunger is normal here. It is part of daily life, a background sensation like the cold. You begin to see how modern expectations of fullness would seem almost extravagant, even absurd in this setting. The family moves on to other tasks, but food remains central. Grain must be ground often to local mill, which may involve fees or obligations to a lord. Bread must be baked in communal ovens, another shared resource that ties the village together. Even cooking becomes a social act shaped by access rules and relationships. You imagine what would happen if the stores ran low too soon. The careful portions would shrink further. Meals would become thinner, more watery. People might turn to less desirable foods, wild plants, bark, mixtures, or whatever could be gathered or traded. The line between hunger and starvation is not a dramatic cliff here. It is a slow slope, and yet there are moments of relief. A well-stocked household might share with a neighbour. A small success like a preserved ham lasting longer than expected can lift spirits for days. Even the simple act of eating together, of passing a bowl, of knowing that for this moment at least there is enough, creates a kind of fragile comfort. You look around the room again, at the faces lit by firelight, at the hands that measure and divide, at the quiet awareness in every movement. Winter is not just endured through warmth and shelter. It is endured through planning, memory and discipline, through the careful management of food that stands between life and loss. The pot is set aside but not emptied. Nothing is ever truly finished here. It is only paused, waiting for the next addition, the next stretch, the next day. And as the morning settles into its slow rhythm, you realise that in this world survival begins not with strength or courage, but with a simple, persistent question that echoes through every household. Will it last? By the time the morning chores begin, your thirst catches up with you. Hunger has been speaking softly since dawn, but thirst is less polite. It arrives with a dry mouth, a smoky tongue, and the strange realization that even getting a drink in winter can become an expedition. You look for a tap. Of course you do. Some small, hopeful part of your modern soul expects to handle a pipe, maybe a glass that has not lived a previous life as a wooden bowl. But the house offers no such miracle. Water must be fetched, it must be carried, it must be trusted, or at least trusted enough, which is not quite the same thing. Outside the lane has hardened overnight. The mud that swallowed your boots yesterday now grips them in frozen ridges. A bucket waits near the door, wooden staves bound together, cold enough to sting your fingers. Someone hands it to you with the casual cruelty of experience, and you follow a young woman toward the village well. The well stands near the centre of the settlement, close enough for use, far enough to make every trip feel personal. Its stones are rimed with frost. The rope is stiff. The handle creaks as it turns a dry, complaining sound that seems much too loud in the pale morning. When the bucket drops, you listen for the splash below, delayed and hollow, as though the earth is thinking about whether to answer. One well-known historical reality is that medieval communities depended on wells, springs, streams and rain collection for water, and access varied greatly by region, wealth and season. In winter, these sources could freeze at the surface, become muddy during thaws, or sit dangerously close to waste animals and other little horrors you would rather not imagine before breakfast. You haul the bucket up slowly. Your hands ache. The rope bites through cloth. The water that emerges is dark and trembling, with a skim of ice forming almost as soon as it meets the air. It looks clean enough, which is a beautifully medieval phrase and also a warning label. Back at the house, some of this water will go into the pot. Some may be heated. Some may be used for washing, though not in the dreamy modern sense. No one is filling a deep bath and lighting lavender candles. Washing is practical, brief, and often partial. Hands, faces, babies, cooking, vessels, wounds when needed. Full bathing exists, especially in towns with bathhouses in some periods, but for many rural people, in hard winter warmth and fuel matter more than feeling spa-fresh. You're offered ale weak and cloudy and you hesitate. Morning ale. Your modern brain tries to raise a responsible eyebrow, but here ale is not merely indulgence. Small ale low in alcohol is a daily drink in many households, brewed from grain and consumed by adults, and sometimes children. The brewing process can make it safer than questionable water, though let us not imagine it as a guaranteed medieval health smoothie. It can still spoil. It can still taste like a damp cellar has developed opinions. You sip. It is sour, grainy, faintly warm, and not entirely unpleasant. Your standards are already changing. Yesterday you might have wanted coffee. Today you're grateful that your drink does not appear to contain a beetle. A strange little winter practice appears when an older villager suggests breaking ice from a trough and melting it near the hearth, but only after tossing aside the dirty surface layer. In some places, people also collected snow for washing, or emergency use, though anyone who has actually eaten snow near a medieval yard full of animals deserves our sympathy and perhaps a stern talk. Clean white snow is not always as innocent as it looks. The village has its own theories about water. Certain springs are said to be good for sore eyes. Others help fertility, fever, toothache, or luck, depending on who is telling the story and how persuasive their grandmother was. Holy wells carry spiritual meaning as well as practical value. People may leave offerings, say prayers, or treat certain waters with deep respect. In a world where illness can arrive without explanation, water is never just water. It is medicine, mystery, danger, blessing, and daily nuisance. Researchers continue to disagree about how often medieval people deliberately avoided plain water because of contamination, since some records show water being drunk regularly, while others emphasize ale, wine, cider, or other prepared drinks. The truth shifts with place, class, and circumstance. A monk in a well-supplied abbey, a peasant near a clean upland spring, and a townswoman beside a polluted ditch are not living the same drinking life. You carry another bucket, and this one sloshes against your leg. The cold soaks your clothing. Your foot slips on packed ice, and for one glorious instant you perform a silent dance, known throughout history as please. Do not fall in front of everyone. You survive with dignity, mostly intact, which is more than many can ask from winter. Inside, the water begins its second life. It loosens yesterday's pottage. It rinses bowls. It dampens cloth. It is poured carefully, never wasted. A child reaches for a ladle and is scolded gently, not because thirst is unimportant, but because every resource must be managed. The well is near, yes, but near does not mean effortless. Someone must fetch every drop. The cold changes the body's relationship with thirst. You sweat less than in summer, but you breathe dry air, live near smoke, eat salted food when preserved stores allow, and drink what is available rather than what you crave. Your lips crack. Your throat scratches. You begin to understand why warm drinks, soups, broths, and ale matter so much. They do more than hydrate. They comfort. At the edge of the village, a stream moves under plates of ice. Children are warned away from it, though children have always treated warnings as interesting suggestions. A boy tests the edge with a stick, then leaps back when it cracks. Nearby, a woman fills a vessel where water still runs clear between stones. She moves with practiced caution. One fall into icy water can turn deadly if clothing freezes and no quick warmth is available. You think about the modern drama of briefly losing hot water at home, and the comparison is almost embarrassing. Here, each warm cup is a minor achievement. Each clean swallow depends on muscle memory and luck. The winter world shrinks around water sources. Paths to wells and streams become worn, icy, and social. People meet there, exchange news, complain about the cold notice, who looks thin, who coughs, who has not come out today. Even water becomes community. As evening approaches, the household prepares for another night. Water is set close enough not to freeze solid if the fire holds. Ale is covered. The pot is watched. The bucket near the door waits for morning, already promising more labour. Outside, the well stones glitter faintly beneath the rising moon, silent and essential. You drink one last mouthful of weak ale, smoky from the room, sour from the grain, precious because it exists. Then you listen as the wind moves around the house, and you realise that winter survival is made from humble things: a covered pot, a guarded ember, a bucket that doesn't crack, a well that doesn't fail. And tomorrow, when your throat dries again, you will go back out into the frost with the others, because thirst, like winter, does not care whether you feel ready. The next thing you notice is your clothing, because in a medieval winter, your body becomes very interested in its own edges. Fingers, toes, ears, nose, wrists, ankles, all the small borders where cold slips in like an uninvited guest, with excellent confidence. You pull your garments closer, but the cold is patient. It does not need a wide door. A loose cuff will do. You begin with linen against the skin. It is not silky, not luxurious, not the soft cloud fabric your modern laundry aisle keeps promising. It is plain practical and a little rough, but it can be washed more easily than wool and helps protect the outer layers from sweat and body oils. Over that comes wool, the great winter hero of medieval Europe. Though hero may be a generous word when it is damp, scratchy, smoky, and smelling faintly like sheep with unresolved issues. Still wool is valuable because it keeps warmth even when wet better than many plant fibres. That matters when the air is damp, the ground is wet, and your life involves walking through weather rather than watching it through insulated glass. A familiar historical truth here is that wool and linen were the basic fabrics for much medieval European clothing, with wool especially important for warmth status trade and daily survival. You wear a tunic, perhaps another tunic over it, then a cloak or mantle. If you are lucky, the cloak is thick. If you are not, it is thin enough to make you develop strong opinions about luck. Your legs may be wrapped or covered with hose. Your feet are in leather shoes or boots, softened by wear, hardened by cold, and not designed with the orthopedic kindness of modern footwear. There is no cheerful foam sole, no waterproof hiking boot, no little tag claiming advanced thermal technology, just leather stitching grease if someone has treated it and hope are doing a lot of unpaid labour. Your shoes are stuffed with straw or wool scraps for warmth. This helps until it shifts, bunches, dampens, or simply gives up. You step outside and feel the cold rise through the soles. It is intimate and immediate. The earth seems to reach up and take inventory of your bones. People around you dress in layers too, but not in the modern outdoor catalogue sense. Their clothing is shaped by labour region, wealth and law. A prosperous villager may have better cloth, finer dye, a lined cloak, perhaps fur edging if status allows. A poorer labourer wears patched garments, reused cloth, and whatever can be made to last another season. Clothing is not disposable. It is cut down, turned, mended, inherited, traded and mourned when ruined. You see a woman near the doorway sewing by weak light, repairing a tear so small you might ignore it today and regret it tonight. Every opening invites cold. Every loose seam wastes warmth. She pushes the needle through thick cloth with firm, practised fingers. Her hands are chapped knuckles, red nails darkened by work. The thread is precious enough not to waste. The patch does not match, and no one cares. Matching is for people who are not freezing. An odd little detail clings to winter clothing like burrs on a hem. People sometimes used animal fats, waxes, or oils to make leather more resistant to water. Helpful, yes. Pleasant smelling, not always. Imagine stepping into a room wearing boots treated with grease after walking past livestock smoke, mud, and old straw. Medieval winter does not have a signature fragrance so much as a committee meeting. Some writers still dispute how effective ordinary medieval clothing was against severe cold, because the answer depends on climate, wealth, fabric quality, and whether garments were dry. A well-layered wool outfit could protect surprisingly well during work, especially if the body kept moving. But standing still in icy rain with damp hems and hungry blood, that is when optimism becomes very thin. You walk with a group toward the woodpile and everyone moves differently under layers. Clothing restricts the arms, cloaks catch on branches, wet hems slap against ankles. A hood muffles sound but saves your ears. A cap or coif under another covering keeps heat from escaping your head, which sounds sensible until the inside grows sweaty, then chills when you stop. Winter is always arranging little traps like that. The children are bundled as best as the household can manage. Their clothing is simpler, smaller, often made from older garments cut down. A child's sleeve may once have been part of an adult tunic. A hood may have belonged to an older sibling then another. Nothing is wasted because every piece of cloth represents labour. Sheep raised, flax grown, fibres prepared, thread spun, cloth woven, garment cut, seam sewn, hours upon hours stitched into the thing you now tug around your shoulders. You remember the spinning near the hearth from last night's at quiet turning work, and now it makes sense. Winter clothing begins long before winter. It begins in fields, barns, shearing, retting, carding, spinning, weaving, fulling, dyeing if dye is available, cutting, sewing, repairing. A cloak is not just a cloak. It is months of human effort pretending to be a simple object. The colours around you are mostly muted. Browns, greys, dull greens, undyed wool, faded reds, or blues for those with better means. Bright dyes exist, but they cost. Rich people can wear their wealth in colour, fur and fullness of cloth. Poor people wear survival. And survival, while admirable, does not always come in jewel tones. At the manor or in town you might see fur linings, better, boots, gloves, layered gowns, heavier mantles and more careful tailoring. But even the wealthy feel winter. Stone chambers can be bitter. Fine cloth does not abolish damp. A noble person may shiver in embroidered wool while a servant keeps the fire alive. Status changes the terms of discomfort, not the existence of it. Your own hands are the problem now. Gloves, if you have them, are awkward for fine work. Bare fingers work better but numb quickly. You tuck your hands under your arms, then need them again, then tuck them back. The rhythm becomes almost comic. Work, freeze warm, repeat. Very glamorous. Very medieval. Someone beside you laughs softly at your clumsiness, not cruelly, just with the calm amusement of a person whose ancestors have already survived this nonsense for generations. Snow begins to fall in small dry flakes. They catch on wool and melt slowly. At first, the cloak repels some moisture, then the dampness settles. The garment grows heavier. Your shoulders ache. The smell deepens, wet wool smoke, human warmth, leather cold air. You breathe into the edge of your hood and feel the damp warmth of your own breath return to your face. By late afternoon, you understand that clothing is not about comfort. It is about reducing harm. It does not make winter vanish. It merely turns unbearable into bearable, fatal, into miserable, exposed, into protected enough. That phrase, protected enough, may be the quiet motto of the season. Back inside, garments are not flung dramatically over a chair. They are hung near warmth, but not too near sparks. Shoes are checked. Wet wrappings are loosened. A cloak is shaken, brushed, and positioned to dry as much as the smoky air allows. The house fills again with steam from damp cloth, and the wool smell rises until even the dog seems personally offended. You sit close to the hearth and rub life back into your fingers. The firelight catches patches on sleeves, darned hose, frayed hems, rough stitches, and the shine of worn leather. Every repair is a small refusal to surrender. Every layer is a boundary drawn against the dark. And as the cold waits outside the walls, pressing its face against every crack, you begin to see clothing not as fashion but as shelter. You carry on your skin a fragile moving house, made of sheep, flax, labour smoke and stubbornness. By now you may be hoping winter offers rest. The fields are frozen after all. The great summer rush is over. No endless bending under the sun, no harvest panic, no sweating behind an ox while the whole world smells of dust and cut grain. Perhaps you think this is the quiet season. Perhaps people sleep late, tell stories and wait gently for spring. That is adorable. The morning proves otherwise before your eyes are fully opened. Someone is already moving in the dark, coaxing the hearth awake. Someone else is checking the animals. A child is sent to fetch water. A man lifts a bundle of tools into better light. The house begins to stir like a tired machine, every person a small working part. Winter may slow the fields, but it does not stop labour. It simply moves it indoors, into barns, into sheds, into the cold corners where tasks have been waiting with folded arms. Today you're taken to the barn. The barn is colder than the house, but drier, which feels almost luxurious until the wind finds the gaps between the boards and starts making suggestions. Inside, stacks of straw and hay line the walls. Tools hang from pegs. Dust floats in narrow shafts of pale light. The smell is deep and layered dry grain, old chaff, animal warmth, mouse droppings, leather wood, and the faint sweetness of stored summer fading slowly into winter. One solid fact of medieval rural life is that winter was a major season for threshing grain by hand. After harvest sheaves were stored, then beaten with flails to separate edible grain from stalks, a slow, physical job that could occupy households for weeks or months. So yes, the field may sleep, but your shoulders will not. A flail is placed in your hands. It's simple 2 wooden sticks joined by a flexible strap or hinge. It looks manageable. This is how history tricks you. A practiced worker swings it in a steady rhythm, lift, full crack, lift, full crack. The sound fills the barn like dull thunder. Stalks break, grain loosens, dust rises. The worker's body moves with economy, not force alone, but timing. Then you try. The flail comes down, badly glances off the straw, and nearly teaches your shin a lesson. Someone laughs into their sleeve. Very kind, very supportive. You try again. This time it lands properly, but the shock travels up your arms. After only a few minutes, your shoulders burn, your palms complain, your back begins drafting a formal petition. The others keep working. The rhythm matters. Too soft and the grain stays trapped. Too hard and you waste energy or damage what you need. The work is dusty, repetitive, and strangely hypnotic. Crack. Shift the straw. Crack. Turn the sheaves. Crack. Sweep the grain. Winter labour has a different sound from summer labour. Summer sings with insects, birds, scythes shouting and carts. Winter beats, scrapes, creaks and coughs. You soon learn that threshing is only the beginning. Grain must be winnowed, cleaned, measured and stored. If the day is right and there is enough moving air, chaff can be tossed and separated. If not, the work waits. Weather commands everything, even indoors. Damp grain is dangerous. Mould can ruin stores. A careless household may lose food not to famine in the dramatic sense, but to moisture, mice and poor timing. Very undramatic. Very deadly. Nearby, someone mends a rake with a new tooth. Another person repairs a harness strap. A woman spins thread while watching a pot. Children sort kindling, pick through stored beans, untangle cord, or perform the ancient childhood duty of being useful while asking questions. Winter is full of small tasks that never receive songs but keep people alive. Mending baskets, sharpening blades, twisting rope, patching sacks, replacing pegs, repairing shoes, cleaning tools, shaping handles, cutting reeds, sorting seed. There is a curious old practice you notice near the workbench. A man rubs a wooden tool handle with fat and ash, then smooths it with a scrap of rough stone. The mix helps seal and polish the wood, or so he says. Whether it works beautifully or merely makes the handle smell like a smoky breakfast is hard to judge, but he seems satisfied, and in this century satisfaction is a legitimate engineering standard. Some historians question how much winter labour varied between regions with different climates, crops and legal obligations. A village in southern France, a sheep-raising settlement in upland England, and a farming community near the Baltic do not share the same calendar in every detail, yet the pattern remains recognisable. When outdoor work slows, maintenance and processing rise to fill the space. Winter is not empty time, it is preparation disguised as endurance. After threshing, you help carry wood. This sounds simple, which is how you know it will not be. The wood pile is never just a pile. It is warmth, cooking light and safety, all stacked in uneven lengths. Some wood was gathered earlier, but more is always needed. Fallen branches are collected. Hedges are trimmed when allowed. Brush is bundled. In regions where peat is used, it must be cut and dried in season, then stored for burning. Every fuel has a story of labour behind it. You lift a bundle and feel its weight settle across your back. The bark is rough. Snow clings to the outer pieces. Your breath grows loud. The path back to the house is short, yet your legs object as if you have proposed crossing the Alps. A child trots ahead with a smaller bundle and looks annoyingly capable. Inside the yard, the wood is stacked under cover if space allows. Wet fuel smokes badly and burns poorly, and the house already has enough smoke to qualify as a personality. Someone checks the stack, mutters about dampness and rearranges pieces to catch air. Even storage requires intelligence. Nothing is simply placed anywhere. Winter punishes carelessness. By midday your hands are raw, Your clothing smells of barn dust and wood. Your throat is rough from chaff. The meal is thin but hot, and you are suddenly grateful for every spoonful. Work sharpens appetite, but appetite does not create food. That is one of winter's ruder little jokes. In the afternoon, cart repair begins. The cart is not moving much now, but spring will demand it. Wheels must be checked, axles greased, iron fittings examined, ropes replaced. If repairs wait until the thaw, it may be too late because spring work arrives all at once like a creditor with excellent memory. A broken cart at planting time can cost more than annoyance. It can cost yield. You watch the older men discuss a cracked wheel as if it is a sick relative. They tap it, turn it, frown, and offer opinions. No one hurries. Wood has grain moods, weaknesses. A wrong repair can fail under load. A good repair may survive years. Skill hides inside gestures that look simple. The women's work is no lighter, though it is easier for later centuries to overlook. Spinning alone can consume staggering amounts of time. Thread does not appear because someone wants a tunic. It is made by fingers, hour after hour, often in winter light near the hearth. Brewing, baking, childcare, animal care, cleaning, preserving, nursing, and household management weave through the day. If anyone tells you medieval winter was restful, please hand them a spindle, a crying baby, a smoky room, and a hungry pig. Then observe their scholarly development. Evening arrives, but work does not end so much as soften. Tools are put away, grain is covered, animals are checked again, the fire is fed. Someone continues sewing by the glow, making tiny stitches that hold back cold as surely as any wall. Someone else turns a wooden peg, shaping it for tomorrow. The children drowse before they are told to sleep. You sit with aching shoulders, listening to the quiet after labour. The barn's flail rhythm still echoes in your muscles. Crack, lift, crack, fall. The sound seems to merge with the pulse of the fire and the wind beyond the walls. You begin to understand that survival in this season is built from repetition. Not one heroic effort, but hundreds of small ones. A repaired strap, a dry log, a sorted sack of grain, a sharpened blade, a stitched sleeve, a child sent back indoors before frostbite takes hold. Every task says the same thing in a different language. Keep going. And as sleep settles over the crowded room again, winter waits outside, but so does spring far away and invisible, depending on everything you mended today. Before dawn, the animals wake the household. Not politely, not with a gentle woodland murmur. They announce themselves through stamping, snorting, clucking, bleating, grunting, and one long bovine complaint that sounds as if the cow has discovered philosophy and found it disappointing. You open your eyes in the dimness, still warm under shared coverings, and remember at once that in this world animals are not background decoration. They are wealth labour food, warmth, danger, obligation, and noise with legs. Someone rises to check them before the fire is fully alive. You follow because apparently you have agreed to experience history with your whole body, poor thing. The yard outside is hard with frost. Your breath floats before you. The sky is blue-black, not yet morning, and the stars look sharp enough to cut. From the byre comes the heavy smell of living animals packed close against winter. Inside the air is warmer, though not clean. Cattle breathe great clouds into the darkness. Their hides steam faintly. Straw rustles under their hooves. The floor is damp rich with manure urine hay and the sour sweetness of warm bodies. You may wish to step carefully. Medieval footwear does not forgive poor decisions. A plain but important truth of medieval farming is that livestock were central to rural survival, not only as sources of meat, milk, wool, hides, eggs and manure, but also as labour. Oxen in particular could be essential for ploughing and keeping them alive. Through winter could shape the success of the coming agricultural year. Lose an ox at the wrong time and spring itself becomes harder. The animals must be fed, and here winter becomes arithmetic again. Hay was cut in summer and stored, but storage never feels like enough. Every forkful given now is one less for later. A cow lowers her head and pulls at the hay with wet, determined lips. Sheep crowd together, smaller bodies breathing in quick little puffs. Chickens complain from their corner because chickens have never accepted any system of government. You watch a man inspect the hay, lifting it to his nose, checking for rot. Mouldy fodder can sicken animals. Damp storage can ruin months of work. The hay smells of dried grass dust and vanished sunlight, which sounds romantic until you remember it is being rationed by people who know exactly how far the stack must stretch. There is no delivery coming, no emergency feed store open until 9, just what was stored, what can be gathered and what the weather allows. A pig grunts in the shadows, thick and suspicious. Pigs are useful because they can turn scraps mast and waste into meat, but winter changes their value. Feeding a pig all the way through the cold months may or may not make sense depending on household resources. Many animals were slaughtered in late autumn or early winter, precisely because keeping every mouth alive was impossible. That meat, if preserved well, became part of the household's winter supply. You remember the earlier pot of pottage and the rare scrap of bacon, and now the story behind it stands in front of you snorting. Survival often requires decisions that are practical and quietly painful. A beloved animal is not a pet in the modern way, but that does not mean people feel nothing. Familiarity grows, so does need. Medieval life has very little room for sentimental waste, but plenty of room for complicated feeling. Near the doorway, a child carries a small bundle of straw to refresh bedding. The child's hands are red from cold. Another child scatters a few grains for hens, who descend with dramatic urgency, as if they have been invited to a royal banquet instead of given a sad breakfast on frozen dirt. Eggs are fewer in winter. Hens slow down with cold and short daylight. Every egg is valuable, a small oval luxury that may go into food trade or a sick person's bowl. There is a strange little belief whispered by the older woman as she watches a cow chew slowly. She says if cattle lie down heavily before sunset, snow is coming. If chickens refuse to range, far bad weather follows. If pigs carry straw in their mouths, expect a storm. Perhaps these signs are careful observation dressed as folklore. Perhaps they're folklore dressed as certainty. Either way, people listen. When the sky can kill you, even a pig with opinions deserves attention. Many specialists continue to examine how closely medieval peasants manage breeding, culling and winter fodder, because written records often come from estates, manors and monasteries, rather than from the poorest households. The accounts tell us numbers, dues, losses and yields, but not always the intimate texture of deciding which animal receives the last good hay, and which one must be sold slaughtered or simply hoped over. You help clean the byre, which is less charming than it sounds, and it does not sound charming. Manure is shoveled, swept, dragged and piled. Yet this too is wealth. Animal waste fertilizes fields. The smell that makes your modern nose question every choice that brought you here is part of next year's bread. Nothing is only itself. Dung is not just filth. It is future harvest fuel in some regions, floor plaster in mixtures, and a reminder that nature has a sense of humour. The cow shifts, her flank brushes your sleeve warm and rough. You feel the living heat through the cloth. Suddenly you understand why animals might be housed close to people in bitter weather. They are not clean radiators, no, but they are radiators with hooves. Their warmth matters. Their breath matters. Their survival matters. You may not enjoy the smell, but you appreciate the heat, which is how winter slowly lowers your standards while improving your gratitude. The sheep are checked for weakness. Woolly, crowded and foolish-looking in half-light, they are more valuable than they appear. Wool can become clothing blankets, trade goods, rent payments and identity. But sheep need fodder too, and they are vulnerable to disease, cold and predators. A single sick animal can worry the whole household. A dead one is not just meat. It is lost wool, lost breeding, lost future. Outside, a thin snow begins to fall. The animals sense the change before you do, or perhaps you imagine they do because you're tired and cold and surrounded by medieval weather prophets with feathers and hooves. The cow stamps again, the hens retreat. The pig roots deeper into straw with admirable commitment. At midday you help carry water to the animals, and this is when you discover that buckets grow heavier in winter. Not physically perhaps, but morally. The path from well to byre becomes slick. Water slops over the rim and freezes on your fingers. A sheep knocks into your knee. The pig makes a noise that sounds like judgment. You begin to understand why every animal fed and watered represents human labour layered onto animal need. In the afternoon, talk turns to fodder. How much remains? How long until grazing returns can branches be cut for browse? Are their leaves stored from autumn? In some regions, peasants gathered tree leaves or cut certain branches to supplement winter feed. This sounds quaint until you picture the work behind it: climbing, cutting, drying, storing, carrying, and convincing an animal that dry leaves are dinner. Again, winter turns everything into negotiation. By evening, the animals are settled. The hens are tucked away from foxes. The cow chews slowly in the dimness. The sheep press together like a single breathing blanket. The pig snores with offensive confidence. The household pauses to listen because animal sounds are information. A strange cough, a restless hoof, a silence where clucking should be all may matter. You return to the house with your clothing scented by the byre. Nobody comments. In fact, you fit in better now. The fire catches the smell and lifts it into the room, along with smoke and steam and damp wool. The whole household carries the animals with it, on sleeves, boots, hands, and worry. As you sit by the hearth, you realise that medieval winter is not survived by humans alone. It is survived by households of many species bound together by hunger, heat, labour, and use. The people feed the animals. The animals warm, work, clothe, nourish, fertilise, and sometimes save the people. It is not tenderness exactly, though tenderness can live there. It is dependence. Outside snow thickens over the yard, softening the tracks between house-well barn and byre. Tomorrow those tracks will need to be opened again. The animals will call before dawn. Someone will rise. Someone always rises. And in the dark, with a cow breathing beyond the wall and the pig dreaming whatever pigs dream, you begin to understand that the whole village is a winter herd, pressed close together waiting for spring with lowered heads and stubborn hearts. The bell wakes you before the animals do. It rolls through the frozen village in a slow iron voice deep enough to feel in the ribs. The sound passes over thatch, barns, sleeping dogs, pale fields, and the hard white lane where yesterday's footprints have stiffened into little troughs. It is not an alarm in the modern sense, though it is certainly rude enough to qualify. It is a summons, a marker, a reminder that even in winter time belongs partly to the church. You rise in the smoky dimness with the household. No one says much. Breath clouds in the colder corners of the room. Cloaks are lifted from pegs, shoes pulled on, hoods arranged. The fire is banked carefully, because a church service may warm the soul, but it will not relight the hearth, unless someone has been sensible before leaving. Outside, the whole village seems to move toward the church in small, dark shapes. People come wrapped in wool shoulders, hunched faces half hidden. Snow squeaks underfoot. A child complains softly and is shushed. Somewhere a goose objects to existence. The church waits at the centre stone grey roof, dusted with white doorway open like a mouth of deeper shadow. A basic truth of medieval life is that the Christian calendar shaped the rhythm of the year in much of Europe, especially through feasts, fasts, saints' days, Advent, Christmas, Lent, and weekly worship. Winter was not just cold time. It was sacred time measured by bells, candles, prayers, obligations, and the repeated promise that darkness would not last forever. You step inside. The air is colder than you hoped. Stone does not do warmth out of generosity. The church smells of wax-damp wool, old wood incense if the parish can afford it, and the faint mineral chill of walls that have been absorbing winter since before your great-grandfather's great-grandfather made questionable choices. People stand close together partly from devotion, partly because body heat is persuasive theology. Candles tremble near the altar. Their flames are small but powerful in the dark interior. Light matters here symbolically and practically. During Advent, the weeks before Christmas, people wait in a season of expectation. The days are short. The fields are dead or sleeping. Hunger has not yet reached its hardest point, but everyone knows it is walking toward them. The idea of holy birth arriving in deep winter carries emotional weight that you can feel without needing anyone to explain it. Latin words move through the air, solemn and unfamiliar to many listeners. Some understand parts, some understand the structure, the gestures, the sound, the moments to kneel or cross themselves. Faith is not always about intellectual clarity. Sometimes it is rhythm, image, sense, sound, and repetition. You may not catch every word, but you understand the collective hush. The priest's breath appears briefly in the air as he speaks. Children shift. Adults bow their heads. An old woman's lips move with private prayers, perhaps for a sick son, a thin cow, a debt, a child's cough, a safe birth, a better thaw. Medieval religion is cosmic, yes, full of salvation and saints and judgment, but it is also intensely local. Please let the oats last. Please let the fever break. Please let the roof hold. After the service, the village does not scatter immediately. People linger outside, though the cold punishes lingering. News passes from mouth to mouth. Who has enough hay? Who has taken ill? Who may need help? Who has brewed badly, which is apparently both a tragedy and a social opportunity. The churchyard becomes a place where spiritual life and village administration gently collide. As Christmas approaches, the mood changes. Not into modern glitter, not into shopping music and cheerful panic, but into a powerful seasonal turning. The Nativity feast brings worship rest from some kinds of labour, and if stores allow better food, a little meat, better ale, spiced treats in wealthier homes, a candle burning longer than usual. The dark is still dark, but for a while people answer it with song. There is an unusual seasonal custom that might catch your attention. In some medieval communities, festive misrule appeared around Christmas or nearby winter celebrations. Young men, clerks, or parish groups might mock authority in controlled ways, choose playful leaders, sing rough songs, or make noise in the streets. Not every village did this, and churchmen often complained, which tells you two things. First, people did it. Second, some of it was probably quite fun. Modern researchers continue to differ over how deeply older pre-Christian winter customs blended with medieval Christian celebration. Some see echoes of ancient seasonal rites beneath the feasting greenery fires and noisy processions. Others warn that it is easy to imagine pagan survivals wherever there is a candle and a branch of holly. The truth may be tangled because human beings are very good at carrying old habits into new meanings without filling out paperwork. You return to the house after worship and the household begins preparing for a feast day as much as resources permit. Feast does not mean abundance for everyone. It means difference. A better loaf, a thicker pottage, a saved piece of pork, perhaps cheese, perhaps apples stored carefully in straw, perhaps a cup of ale that tastes less like apology. The point is not luxury. The point is that today is not exactly yesterday. Church fasting rules also shape winter eating. Certain days restrict meat and fish becomes important where available. In coastal regions, riverside towns, monasteries and markets with trade connections, preserved fish can travel far inland. Salted herring, for example, appears across medieval diets in many places. Imagine cold fingers, smoky room dark bread and a salty fish so assertive it seems to have its own personality. Bedtime history does not always smell gentle. You sit by the hearth while someone recalls a saint's story. Saints fill winter with invisible company. St. Nicholas, St. Lucy in some regions, St. Stephen, the Holy Innocents. local patrons whose feast days bring memory and meaning. Each name anchors the cold to a wider world. You're not merely trapped in a village with coughing relatives and a judgmental pig. You are part of sacred history watched over by heaven, or so you hope. The church calendar also offers rest, though rest is never complete. Animals still need care, fires still need fuel, children still need feeding. But feast days interrupt the grinding sameness. They allow people to gather, sing, share, and remember that survival is not only physical. A person can be warm enough and fed enough and still crushed by endless grey. Ritual lifts the eyes even briefly. Even the bells matter. They call people to prayer, mark deaths, warn of danger, announce holy days, and carve the day into recognisable pieces. In a world without personal clocks, the bell is a public heartbeat. You may resent it when it wakes you, but you would miss it if it fell silent. Night comes early again. The household settles after the day's observances, softer somehow, though not free from worry. A candle burns near a small image or token of devotion. Someone hums a carol under their breath. The tune is simple, rising and falling like breath in sleep. Outside snow gathers in the churchyard, covering old graves, smoothing names, softening the hard edges of the world. You feel how winter faith wraps around practical life. Prayer does not replace stored grain. Saints do not chop firewood. The priest will not personally persuade the hens to lay more eggs, although one hates to limit divine possibility. But belief gives shape to fear. It makes the dark speakable. It turns the turning year into a story in which cold has a place, hunger has a season, and light returns because it must. The fire lowers. The bell is silent now, but its echo remains in your body. Tomorrow there will be chores, fodder, water smoke, and the same thin questions of survival. Yet tonight, beneath the long winter sky, the village has placed its hardship inside ritual song and shared hope. And as you drift towards sleep, you understand that the medieval winter is not only endured with wool grain and guarded embers, it is endured with calendars, candles, saints' bells, and the stubborn belief that beyond the frozen fields, grace may still be moving quietly through the dark. By the next morning, the cough has found the room. It begins with one child, small and dry, tucked under a blanket near the hearth. Then the older man answers with a deeper cough from the shadows. Then the woman, stirring the pot, clears her throat not dramatically, but often enough that everyone notices and no one says much. In a crowded winter house, illness does not knock. It moves in with the smoke, sits beside the fire and shares the bedding. You feel it too. The scratch in your throat, the sting in your eyes, the heavy feeling behind the forehead after another night of breathing smoke and cold air. Your modern instincts want tissues, cough syrup, vitamin tablets, maybe a thermometer with a clean little beep. Here your tools are warmth rest, if the household can afford it. Herbs, prayer experience, and a great deal of hoping the fever chooses someone else. A reliable piece of background knowledge is that medieval people suffered from many winter complaints familiar today, including respiratory infections, aching joints, skin problems, tooth pain, lice, fleas and illnesses, worsened by poor nutrition and smoky interiors. They did not think of germs as we do, but they were not foolish. They noticed patterns. They knew cold, damp, bad air weakness and crowding could make sickness worse, even if their explanations used different language. The child coughs again. The mother touches his forehead with the back of her hand. This gesture is ancient, tender, and still recognizable across centuries. Too hot, too cold, sweating, shivering, breathing easily. Every household has its own small medical knowledge carried mostly by women, older relatives, midwives, healers, and anyone who has survived enough winters to become useful. A pot of something is set near the fire. It smells bitter green and woody. Perhaps horehound for coughs, or sage or thyme or whatever grows locally and has a reputation for helping. Honey would soften the taste if the household has any, but honey is valuable, so the drink may arrive plain and stern. You sip and try not to make a face. Medieval medicine often feels like being disciplined by a hedge. An odd remedy passes from neighbour to neighbour in whispers. For a stubborn cough, someone suggests a syrup of onions and honey. Another mentions warmed ale with herbs. A third recommends placing certain plants near the bed to sweeten the air. Some remedies are sensible enough, others are more hopeful than helpful. But before you smile too hard, remember that many modern people still believe a wet head causes instant doom, so let us be humble together. There is ongoing discussion among medical historians about how effective ordinary household remedies were in practice, because some were grounded in useful plant properties, while others rested on symbolic thinking, humoral theory, or simple tradition. The line between medicine, comfort ritual, and placebo is not always clean, especially when the patient is cold frightened and desperate for care. You watch the older woman sort dried herbs from a pouch. The leaves crackle between her fingers. She knows their names, their smells, their seasons, the places where they grow. Her knowledge is not written in a book. It lives in memory, repetition, and the body. She may not read Latin medical texts, but she knows which child needs warming, which fever is dangerous, which wound smells wrong, which neighbour should be called when childbirth begins badly. Winter presses illness inward. People crowd together for heat, and that closeness spreads lice, fleas, skin, irritation, and infection. Bedding is shared. Clothing is layered and washed less often in severe cold. Straw on floors can harbour pests. Hair may itch under caps. A child scratches at the neck until an adult slaps the hand away gently, then begins picking through the hair with grim patience. Lice are not merely unpleasant, they are part of the social atmosphere, tiny witnesses to human closeness. Combs help. Washing helps when possible. Heat smoke herbs and regular attention help somewhat, but total control is difficult. You begin to understand why people shave heads in some settings, why linen underclothes matter, why changing bedding is not just housekeeping but defence. Then there are teeth. A man at the edge of the room winces as he chews. One cheek is slightly swollen. He tries to hide it because there is work to do and pain does not excuse the animals from needing fodder. Medieval teeth are not always as universally rotten as cartoons suggest. Diets often contain less refined sugar than modern diets, which helps. But grit from stone ground flour can wear teeth down, and infections can become dangerous. Toothache in winter is a private little nightmare pulsing beside the hearth while everyone else sleeps. Someone offers a clove if trade has brought such treasure within reach, or a local herb or warm cloth against the jaw. A village practitioner might pull a tooth if necessary, though the phrase "if necessary" is doing heroic work. You are grateful suddenly and deeply for modern dentistry, a field that deserves more bedtime lullabies than it receives. Outside cold air can feel clean after the smoky house, but it bites the lungs. You step out to carry a bucket and breathe too sharply. The air burns, your nose runs, the snow reflects pale light. A sick person brought into such cold without enough covering can worsen quickly. Yet staying indoors means smoke-damp bedding and shared breath. Winter offers choices, but many of them are rude. The household makes adjustments. The coughing child is moved closer to warmth, but not too near the smoke. A thinner blanket is traded for a thicker one. The pottage is made softer. Someone saves a little extra broth. Someone else mutters that the child should not have gone near the stream yesterday because every illness needs a story, and blame is often easier than uncertainty. The church enters the scene as well. A prayer may be said, a saint invoked, a charm murmured quietly, perhaps not quite official but comforting. Illness belongs both to body and spirit in this world. People seek help from herbs, holy water, relics, confession amulets, and practical nursing sometimes all at once. Medieval life does not require choosing one category when fear can use many tools. In town, a wealthier person might consult a physician trained in university medicine discussing humours, diet, bloodletting, purging, and astrological timing. In a monastery, an infirmary might offer more organised care. In a village, treatment is more local, more domestic, and often more immediate. What matters is whether the fever breaks, whether the patient drinks, whether warmth holds, whether the body has enough strength to return. By afternoon, the child sleeps. Everyone speaks more quietly. The room feels suspended. The fire pops softly. The pot murmurs. Snow taps against the roof like fingers. You notice how illness changes the household's pace. Tasks continue, but attention bends toward the sick bed. People listen between chores. Is the breathing easier? Has the cough deepened? Is the forehead cooler? This is not a world without care. It is a world with limited power. That may be harder. Love is present, skilled, persistent, and sometimes helpless. A mother can warm broth, change bedding, sing softly, rub chilled feet, pray until her lips ache, and still not command the fever to leave. The tenderness is real, so is the danger. Evening gathers. The older man coughs again, then laughs weakly at himself, saying the smoke is trying to make sausage of him. The joke lands softly, not because it is brilliant, but because humour makes fear breathe more easily. Someone answers that he would be too tough to chew. The child stirs but does not wake. You settle near the hearth, feeling your own throat, listening to the room's rough chorus of breath. Medieval winter is not only cold outside the body. It enters through lungs, skin, teeth, stomach, and blood. It finds weakness and presses there. It makes small illnesses larger through hunger, smoke, damp, and exhaustion. And still the household keeps watch. Herbs steep, blankets are tucked, embers glow. A hand rests on a sleeping child's brow in the dark, checking again, hoping again. Beyond the door, the frozen village lies silent under snow, while inside, breath by breath, everyone waits to see who will be stronger by morning. By mid-morning, someone decides the road must be taken. This is not said with excitement. No one claps. No one says, "Lovely, a winter walk." A message needs carrying, or a debt must be discussed, or a small trade must happen before the weather closes again. In medieval winter, travel is not leisure with scenic views. Travel is risk with scenery attached. You're given a staff, a cloak, and the kind of look people give to someone who has not yet fallen into a frozen ditch, but is clearly available for the experience. The household checks the sky. They check the wind. They ask after the road from a neighbour who came through yesterday. News of paths travels faster than carts. A bridge is slick. A ford is swollen. The forest track is passable if you avoid the hollow near the old oak. The innkeeper, 2 villages over, has watered the ale again, which is apparently not a travel hazard, but still worth reporting. You step beyond the village boundary and immediately the world feels larger and less forgiving. The fields lie flat and white. Hedges make black lines across the snow. The road is not a road in the modern sense, more a memory pressed into the land by feet. Hooves, wheels, rain and habit. In places it is frozen solid. In others, where sun has touched it, mud waits beneath a thin crust like a practical joke. A well-established reality of medieval movement is that roads varied enormously in quality, and winter weather could turn travel slow, dangerous and unpredictable. Roman roads survived in some areas, local tracks served most daily needs, and rivers could be highways or barriers depending on season freezing flooding and bridges. You do not simply go somewhere, you negotiate with landscape. Your boots slip before the first mile ends. The stuff saves you. The person beside you does not laugh, which is kind, but the silence is worse because it suggests this was expected. Every step demands attention. Snow hides ruts, ice hides beneath powder, frozen mud twists ankles. A path that is easy in summer becomes a puzzle in winter, and the reward for solving it is continuing to be outside. The cold air sharpens sounds. A crow calls from a bare branch. Somewhere in the distance an axe strikes wood, the sound travelling strangely far. Your own breathing grows loud beneath your hood. Wool scratches at your chin. The cloak shifts on your shoulders. The bundle you carry seems heavier every few minutes, although you suspect it is only your spirit becoming dramatic. You pass a wayside cross leaning slightly crusted with frost. Travellers have left small marks nearby, perhaps stones, perhaps bits of cloth, perhaps a prayer made visible. The road has its own sacred geography. Crosses, shrines, bridges, boundary stones, holy wells, and church towers help people orient themselves not just physically but emotionally. They say someone has passed here before. Someone may pass here after you. Try not to die in between. An odd travel belief comes up as your companion watches the sky. He says that if the moon has a ring around it, snow will follow within days. Another traveller once told him that carrying a piece of rowan wood protects against being led astray by spirits in wild places. You're not sure whether you prefer meteorology or magical forestry, but in a cold, lonely lane, both feel more comforting than having no system at all. Specialists still disagree about how common long-distance winter travel was for ordinary rural people. Since legal records, pilgrimage accounts, merchant documents, and manorial paperwork show movement, but daily fear fatigue and failed journeys rarely leave neat evidence. Some people travelled because they had to, others avoided it unless necessity pushed them. What looks on paper like a simple trip between villages may, under snow, become a small survival story. The road enters woodland. Here the light changes. Snow clings to branches. The air smells of bark, damp leaves, old frost, and something animal. The path narrows and conversation softens. Forests are useful places, sources of fuel, forage, building material, grazing, hunting, and danger. They are also places where law may become complicated. Not every fallen branch belongs to the person who finds it. Lords often control woodland rights, and taking fuel or game can carry penalties. Imagine freezing beside firewood you're not legally allowed to collect. History does enjoy dark little jokes. You listen for wolves. Whether wolves are common here depends on region and century, but medieval people certainly knew them as real animals and powerful symbols. Stories enlarge them, fear sharpens them. A lone traveller hears one branch snap and suddenly becomes deeply interested in staying near companions. The forest seems to lean closer. Even the snow falling from a branch makes your heart jump. Very heroic of you. Bandits are another concern, though perhaps less constant than fiction suggests. War, famine, poverty, and weak local authority can make roads more dangerous. Travellers prefer company when they can get it. Merchants, pilgrims, messengers, peasants carrying goods to market, clergy, soldiers, and wandering labourers may share roads at different times. A stranger is both potential help and potential problem. Medieval hospitality and suspicion walk side by side like two tired cousins. By noon your group reaches a stream crossing. In summer it might be easy. In winter the banks are slick and the water runs dark beneath thin plates of ice. There is no elegant bridge here, only stones, a rough plank, and faith in your balance. One person crosses first, testing each step. The plank bends. Water whispers below. You suddenly imagine falling in clothing, soaking boots, filling fingers, numbing the long walk back, becoming something more serious than discomfort. You cross slowly. The staff taps. One foot, then the other. The world narrows to the plank, the water, the breath held in your chest. Then you reach the far bank and the relief is so strong you nearly laugh. This is what travel does. It turns small crossings into victories. At the next village, smoke rises from chimneys and roof holes. Dogs bark. A few people glance up as you enter, measuring you with quick eyes. News is exchanged before goods. Who is ill? Which road is blocked? Has the Lord's reeve been through? Is the mill working? Has anyone seen soldiers? Information is a winter currency sometimes worth more than coin. There may be an inn or alehouse if the settlement lies on a busier route. Inside, travellers crowd near the fire, bringing in wet wool, mud horse smell and rumour. Ale is poured. Bread is shared or sold. A corner may be available for sleeping, though comfort is negotiable and fleas are democratic. Inns in this world are not cosy fantasy taverns, where everyone has a private room and emotional lighting. They are noisy, smoky, mixed spaces where humans, animals, goods and stories overlap. You warm your hands around a cup and listen. A merchant complains that a cartwheel cracked on frozen ground. A pilgrim says a shrine farther south has worked miracles for fever. A carter swears the river road is safer unless it floods, in which case it is not a road so much as an accusation. Everyone has advice. Much of it conflicts. All of it is delivered with confidence. Then comes a return because winter travel is cruel enough to make arrival only half the problem. Afternoon light fades early. Shadows thicken under hedges. The temperature drops and yesterday's slush begins to harden again. You hurry, but not too much because hurry causes falls. Your legs ache. Your fingers are stiff. The bundle is lighter now, yet your body feels heavier. The village you left this morning becomes the thing you long for, not because it is comfortable, but because its discomfort is familiar. At last the church tower appears against the dim sky. Smoke rises beyond it. The sight touches something deep in the chest. Home in winter is not romance. It is known danger instead of unknown danger. It is the fire that smokes in the usual way. The straw with its familiar bite, the people whose coughs you recognize. You step back through the doorway as dusk closes behind you. The room's warmth meets your face. Someone takes the news. Someone asks about the road. Someone laughs when you admit the stream nearly defeated you. The animals shift beyond the wall. The pop bubbles. The world shrinks again to hearthlight. And as your boots thaw slowly near the fire, releasing a smell that should probably apologize, you understand why winter travel is never taken lightly. Every path is a question. Every crossing is a bargain. Every mile asks whether the reason for going is stronger than the danger of leaving. After the road, the manor feels almost grand. Not comfortable exactly. Let's not get carried away. But as you approach through the dull winter afternoon, the buildings rise with a confidence the cottages do not have. There is a hall, barn storehouses, stables, perhaps a chapel, perhaps a tower, or defensive enclosure, depending on place and century. The roofs are better maintained. The yard is busier. Smoke rises in thicker streams. Dogs bark with the deep certainty of animals that have eaten better than you. You enter through the outer yard and feel the difference before anyone explains it. Here winter is still dangerous, still cold, still hungry in its own way, but the household has more layers between itself and disaster. More grain in storage, more servants, more animals, more fuel, more rooms, more authority. Poverty faces winter skin to skin. Wealth puts on armour even if the armour has drafts. A widely accepted feature of medieval society is that warmth, food security and winter comfort varied sharply by social rank. Lords, knights, wealthy clergy and prosperous townspeople could often rely on larger stores, better buildings, servants and access to trade, while poorer peasants lived closer to shortage. No one escapes the season entirely, but some people meet it with fuller barns. You are led toward the great hall and your body leans toward the heat before your manners catch up. The hall is large, smoky and alive with movement. A central hearth burns on the floor, or a fireplace warms one end, depending on the building's design and period. The fire is larger than the peasant hearth, but the space is larger too. Heat rises into rafters, drifts into corners and leaves cold patches where servants move, with trays, buckets, baskets, and the quiet speed of people whose work is never finished. The Lord's table sits at the upper end, raised or set apart, not necessarily with fairy tale extravagance, but clearly marked by hierarchy. Benches, boards, trestle tables, stools, rushes on the floor, dogs underfoot, servants passing behind shoulders. Everyone knows where they belong. Winter does not erase rank. If anything, cold makes rank more visible. Who sits nearest the best fire? Who eats first? Who wears lined wool? Who carries the wood? You smell roasting meat and your stomach becomes suddenly poetic. In the village, meat appears as a rare flavour, a scrap of memory preserved in salt. Here, it may be served more openly, at least for the elite table. Not every meal is a banquet, but even ordinary noble food can seem astonishing beside thin pottage. Bread is finer, ale stronger. Wine may appear. Spices, if the household is wealthy enough, drift through sources like rumours from faraway lands. But do not imagine everyone in the manor eats equally. The servants work hard, and their rations depend on status within the household. A steward is not a scullion. A cook is not a stable boy. A lady's attendant is not a field labourer hired for a task. The manor is not a cosy family with extra chairs. It is an institution that eats commands, stores, pays, punishes, and celebrates. A curious detail hides in the rushes under your feet. In larger houses, floors might be strewn with rushes or straw, sometimes mixed with herbs, to freshen the space. Sweet flag, lavender, rosemary, or other fragrant plants could be used when available. The result may have smelled pleasant for about 3 heroic minutes before smoke dogs spilled ale grease and winter boots returned to democracy. Some researchers continue to question how comfortable elite interiors actually felt by modern standards, since written descriptions emphasize hospitality and display, while physical evidence reminds us that many halls were drafty, smoky, and difficult to heat evenly. A lord may have better blankets and more food, yes, but stone and timber can still hold cold like a grudge. You watch servants bring in more fuel. Their arms are full. Their faces are red from cold and effort. Keeping a manor warm enough to function takes enormous labour. Wood must be cut, carted, stacked, dried, carried, arranged, and guarded. The fire that looks generous from the high table is built on the backs of people you might not notice if you only stared at the lord. In a private chamber, conditions may be better. Smaller rooms hold warmth more easily. Wall hangings help block drafts. Bed curtains create a pocket of warmer air around sleepers. Thick mattresses feather beds for the wealthy, fur coverings, and layered textiles create comfort most villagers could only admire from a safe emotional distance. A noble woman's bed may be one of the warmest places in the building, a small tent of fabric against the cold, yet even here winter intrudes. Water freezes in basins, ink thickens. Fingers stiffen during prayer or writing. Servants rise before their masters to stir fires. Clothes must be warmed before dressing. Horses need care. Accounts must be kept. Visitors arrive with demands. Hospitality carries social importance, and a lord expected to feed retainers, guests, clerks, messengers, and sometimes the poor at certain times. A full hall is impressive, but it also consumes stores rapidly. You step into the kitchens and the heat strikes like another climate. Here the fire is fierce. The air smells of broth smoke roasting fat onions, elf flour, and sweat. Cooks work with knives, spits, cauldrons, ladles, and the intense focus of people one mistake away from being shouted at by someone important. Steam clouds the rafters, ash dusts the floor. A boy turns a spit face, flushed eyes, tired. It is warmer here, yes. It is also exhausting. Medieval luxury often means someone else is overheated on your behalf. The pantry and stores reveal the real privilege. Barrel sacks, hooks, bins, salted meat, dried fish, grain cheese, perhaps dried fruit, nuts, spices in small guarded quantities. Food storage is power. A manor can lend grain demand, rent supply. Retainers host feasts and survive shortages longer than a cottage. It can also squeeze the village when dues are owed, which makes its plenty feel less innocent. Outside you see peasants arriving with payments or labour obligations, grain, eggs, hens, firewood service. The manor gathers winter resources from the surrounding community, through rents, customs and authority. The warmth inside the hall is connected to the cold outside. One person's thick cloak may be woven through another person's obligation. History rarely lets comfort stand alone. A steward checks records perhaps on parchment or wax tablets. Who owes what, who has paid, which tenant is late. Which field belongs to whom? Winter may freeze the soil, but paperwork remains irritatingly fertile. A peasant's hardship does not always cancel dues. Mercy exists, negotiation exists, delay exists, but so do fines, pressure, and lordly expectation. You return to the hall as evening deepens. Minstrels might appear in a wealthy household, or a local singer, or simply the rough music of servants and retainers after work. Stories travel through halls, news from towns, rumours of war, saints' tales, hunting boasts, legal disputes, marriage negotiations. The manor is warmer than the cottage, not only in fuel but in information. Power gathers news the way barns gather grain. At the upper table someone laughs loudly. Near the door a servant rubs cold hands together before lifting another tray. A dog steals something small and is kicked away without much conviction. The fire brightens and throws enormous shadows onto the beams. For a moment the hall seems almost golden, full of noise and food and light. Then the door opens. A blade of cold enters sharp and immediate. Everyone near it flinches. The illusion breaks. Winter steps into the manor as easily as it enters the cottage. Only here it must pass more guards, more servants, more walls, more stored wealth. It is delayed, not defeated. You think back to the village house where a single pot fed a family and animals breathed through the wall. You think of the manor stores, the layered beds, the larger fires, the better bread. The difference is enormous, and yet the same season presses over both roofs. In one place, survival means rationing beans. In another, it means managing abundance carefully enough to maintain status and obligation. Both are winter stories, but only one has much room for error. When you leave the hall, the cold outside feels sharper after warmth. The village lights flicker below. Smoke rises from small homes, thin and determined. Behind you, the manor glows not like a paradise, but like a reminder that winter is never equal. And as you walk back toward the cottage, cloak drawn tight, you understand that medieval cold does not fall evenly. It gathers in the cracks of society in the thin blankets, empty stores, unpaid dues, and tired hands that carry wood for someone else's fire. The next market day arrives under a sky the colour of old pewter. You leave the village before the sun has fully committed to the idea of rising. The road is slick again, hardened at the edges, soft in the middle, where carts have broken the frost. People walk with baskets, sacks, bundles of cloth cages, jars, and the careful expressions of those carrying something worth more than their comfort. A woman balances eggs wrapped in straw. A boy leads a thin goat with the grim patience of someone already tired of the goats. A man carries a side of smoked meat beneath cloth, and every dog within 3 miles suddenly discovers faith. Winter market is not cheerful in the way a summer fair might be. It is quieter, tighter, more practical, yet it pulls people together. You can feel the draw of it across the frozen landscape. The market town or larger village with trading rights becomes a winter lung where the countryside breathes in salt iron, clothfish news and money, then breathes out grain wool labour, gossip and anxiety. A dependable piece of historical context is that medieval markets were often regulated by lords' towns or royal authority, with rights to hold markets and fairs carrying economic importance. These gatherings allowed rural households to buy goods they could not make easily sell surplus when they had any settled debts, hear news and maintain social ties beyond the village. As you approach, sound reaches you before the stalls do. Hooves on frozen ground, cartwheels grinding, a vendor calling in a voice made hoarse by cold, chickens protesting their entire commercial situation. Somewhere a blacksmith's hammer rings bright and hard. Smoke rises from food sellers' hearths and nearby houses, flattening under the low winter clouds. The market square is crowded but not abundant. Winter narrows what can be offered. Root vegetables sit in baskets, earth still clinging to them. Onions hang in strings. Dried peas and beans are measured carefully. Salted fish lies stiff and pale, smelling like the sea has travelled inland and lost its manners. Wheels of cheese rest under cloth. Bundles of firewood change hands faster than fancy ribbons. Candles, rushlights, coarse cloth, leather goods, metal fittings, pottery rope pins, needles and second-hand garments all matter here. You notice the salt first. Salt is not glamorous, but winter respects it. Salt preserves meat and fish, seasons dull food, and enters trade routes that tie villages to coasts, mines, towns, and merchants far beyond what most peasants will ever see. A small measure of salt can feel like a luxury and a necessity at once. Someone haggles over it with the intensity modern people reserve for rent, medical bills, and suspicious airline fees. A fishmonger slaps a salted herring onto a board. It lands with a sound that is somehow both wet and wooden. Herring is common enough in many medieval diets, especially where trade networks make it available, and it feeds countless fasting days when meat is forbidden. You lean closer and immediately regret having a nose. Still in January, strong-smelling protein has its own charm. A very practical charm, but charm nonetheless. There is a peculiar little market custom you hear from a stallholder selling candles. He claims that if a candle gutters blue in winter, spirits are near, or someone in the house is lying, or the tallow is poor depending on which version of the tale earns better attention. In truth, bad wicks draughts and uneven fat can explain many dramatic flames. But where there is darkness, people give light a personality. Current scholarship remains divided on how far rural peasants depended on markets compared with household production and local exchange, since evidence differs by region, century, and wealth. Some communities were deeply tied into trade, especially near towns or navigable rivers. Others lived more locally, using markets for key goods rather than daily supply. Standing here among salt-iron fish and cloth, you can see that even a poor household is not sealed off from the wider world. It touches the world in small purchases. You move between stalls with the family watching choices unfold. They do not browse. Browsing belongs to people with spare coin and warm fingers. Every purchase is weighed against every future need. Salt or thread. A new knife blade or more fish, candle material, or a little extra grain. Pay a debt now or delay and risk anger later. The market is a place of goods, yes, but also decisions, and decisions are tiring. A cloth seller shakes out a length of rough wool. It is brownish grey, thick, and not cheap. A woman runs it between her fingers, testing weave and weight. She sees more than you do. She sees how it will wear, how it will cut, how many patches it may yield later, whether it can become a child's tunic after serving an adult first. Cloth is future warmth folded on a table. Nearby, a peddler offers small objects that seem almost magical after village simplicity. Pins, combs, cheap rings, beads, needles, little religious tokens, a pilgrim badge from a shrine many miles away. Children stare. Adults pretend not to then look anyway. Even hardship leaves room for longing. A tiny bright thing can lift a winter day more than its price suggests. Debt moves quietly through the square. A man speaks with a creditor near the church wall, both faces calm, both voices low. Grain borrowed after a bad harvest must be repaid. Rent may be due. Tools may be pledged. A household can enter the market hoping to buy and leave, having sold something it wanted to keep. The square is public, but worry remains private until it cannot. You pass the baker's stall and the smell nearly stops you. Warm bread in winter is a form of persuasion. Loaves sit under cloth, their crusts dark, their interiors dense. Some are finer than others, depending on grain and price. A poorer buyer may choose coarse bread or flour or nothing at all if home stores must do. The scent is almost cruel. Your stomach, having learned nothing from previous disappointment, becomes optimistic again. A woman sells ale from a large jug, ladling it into cups. Travellers stand close shoulders, hunched, steam rising from their clothing. A cup of ale in the market is drink warmth. social permission and news channel. People share updates about roads, illness, a marriage arrangement, a disputed boundary, a rumour of soldiers, a priest who slipped on ice after scolding children for running. That last story travels with particular joy because winter appreciates balance, and so do villagers. At the edge of the market, animals are traded. Chickens in wicker cages, a piglet wrapped in outrage, sheep inspected with professional suspicion, teeth checked, legs felt, wool examined, prices argued. Animals are not cute purchases, they are investments, risks, and mouths. Buying livestock in winter requires confidence in fodder. Selling may mean distress or strategy. You listen as two men argue over a sheep's age with the seriousness of philosophers debating the soul. The reeve or market official watches measurements, false weights. Poor quality goods, illegal prices and disorder can bring fines. Trade is not a free swirl of rustic charm. It is regulated, taxed and observed. Lords profit from market rights. Town authorities guard privileges. Buyers and sellers navigate rules as much as prices. Still, the market offers pleasure. A singer begins near a wool voice thin but lively. People pause. The song tells of a foolish husband, a clever wife, a greedy monk, or possibly all three, because medieval humour enjoys efficient arrangements. Laughter rises brief and smoky in the cold air. For a few moments, people are more than hungry bodies bargaining over salt. They're an audience, a crowd, a little community larger than any one village. Snow begins to fall, softening the edges of stalls and shoulders. Vendors cover goods with cloth. Buyers hurry. The square grows slippery. A cart horse stamps and tosses its head. The family makes final choices. Salt. A bit of thread, 2 hard fish, perhaps a small bundle of rushlights. Not much, but enough to matter. As you leave the market, noise fades behind you, but its goods travel home in the basket, and its news travels in every mind. The road back is quiet. Snow lands on the cloth covering the fish. Your fingers ache around the handle. The village waits ahead, smoky and familiar. By the time you step indoors again, the market has already changed the household. Salt will stretch meat. Thread will close a tear. Fish will strengthen a meal on a fasting day. Gossip will be repeated by the hearth until it becomes part of winter's entertainment. Debt will be worried over in silence after the children sleep. You set the basket down near the fire and the room leans toward it, not dramatically but with interest. Every object has travelled through cold law price labour and need to arrive here. The world outside the village has entered in small measures, and as the fish is unwrapped with a smell that could wake the dead and possibly offend them, you understand that the medieval winter market is not a break from survival. It is one of survival's busiest rooms, where hunger, hope, trade and rumour stand shoulder to shoulder under the grey sky. By the time you wake, the smallest child is already crying, not loudly. That would take too much strength. It is a thin, tired sound, the kind that curls around the room and finds every adult nerve. The mother lifts the child close, pressing a hand beneath the little tunic to feel for warmth. The child's feet are cold. The nose is running. The cheeks are flushed in uneven patches. No one panics because panic spends energy, but the room changes. Everyone hears it. Winter is hardest on bodies that cannot bargain with it. Children, elders, the sick, the pregnant, the injured, the very poor. Anyone who needs extra warmth, extra food, extra care and cannot always give enough labour back. Medieval households know this without saying it plainly. They organise themselves around fragility even while pretending life is simply continuing. A well-supported historical reality is that infant and child mortality in medieval Europe was high by modern standards, and winter could increase danger through cold respiratory illness, poor nutrition, and crowded living conditions. People loved their children fiercely, but love had to work inside a world with fewer protections, fewer treatments, and far less margin for error. You watch the mother warm the child's feet against her own body. Another adult shifts closer to block a draft. Someone feeds the fire a little more than usual, though you can see the quick glance toward the wood stack. Compassion and calculation sit together by the hearth not as enemies but as reluctant partners. The child needs warmth now. The household needs fuel tomorrow. Winter keeps forcing this kind of arithmetic, and frankly, it has terrible manners. The older people are watched too. The grandfather who joked about Smoke making sausage of him now sits wrapped in a cloak, shoulders, narrow hands trembling slightly as he holds his bowl. He eats slowly. His teeth trouble him. His cough is better today, or perhaps he has learned to hide it more politely. The family gives him softer food, and no one comments on the extra time he takes. In a world with no retirement plan beyond kinship, memory, usefulness, and mercy, elders remain woven into household life. They are not only burdens. The old woman by the hearth knows which herbs to steep, which neighbour stores good onions, which field floods first, which saints' days matter, which families quarrel quietly and should not be seated together at a wedding. She carries the village inside her. Her body may be fragile, but her knowledge is shelter. You notice how children are trained into usefulness early. A girl no higher than the table carries kindling in both arms. A boy watches the hens, then runs back because the rooster has opinions about authority. Another child rocks the baby while an adult kneads dough. Childhood exists here with play-teasing curiosity and little bursts of laughter, but it is braided tightly with work. The idea that children should be protected from all responsibility would seem strange, possibly luxurious, possibly like something invented by people with too many chairs. Still they play when they can. Outside after the morning meal, two children slide along the frozen lane on bits of wood shrieking until an adult tells them to stop before they break something expensive such as a leg. One has a rag ball stuffed with scraps, another draws shapes in frost with a stick. Their games are simple, but their delight is not. Medieval winter does not cancel childhood. It only gives it colder fingers. A curious belief appears when the baby sneezes 3 times. An older neighbour says 3 sneezes may mean a spirit has passed close, or that the child will soon grow stronger depending on how hopeful one feels. Another woman mutters a blessing quickly. Sneezes, birthmarks, cradle charms, red thread, little amulets, whispered prayers all gather around children, because children are precious and uncertain. When the world feels dangerous, protection becomes imaginative. There is still debate among social historians about how medieval parents emotionally understood childhood, especially because many surviving records come from legal, religious, or elite sources rather than ordinary homes. Older theories sometimes claimed parents were emotionally distant because child death was common. More recent work often emphasizes evidence of affection, grief, play care, and deep attachment. Sitting in this room, watching a mother warm a child's feet with her own skin, the idea of indifference feels very far away. Food reveals the household's priorities. The youngest child receives a softened crust soaked in broth. The elder gets a portion that is easier to chew. A working adult takes what remains and says it is enough. Is it truly enough? Maybe not. But family life depends on small acts of self-denial, so ordinary that no one makes speeches about them. A mother eats later, a sibling pretends not to want the larger piece. An old man slips part of his bread to a child when he thinks no one sees. The room is full of quiet negotiations. Who sleeps nearest the fire? Who gets the least smoky corner? Who is sent outside and who is kept in? Which child can handle cold? Which elder can still rise at night without falling? Winter tests not just resources but attention. Survival depends on noticing. You help shake out bedding, and the straw smells stale, warm, and faintly sour. A child's sleeping place is moved away from a damp wall. The old woman's blanket is patched again, though the patch is from cloth so worn it may soon need its own patch, a tiny ancestor of future laundry despair. The household has no perfect solution, only adjustments. Shift this mat, plug that gap, warm the bowl, save the broth, Bring the child inside before dusk. Outside the village shows the same pattern. A neighbour brings a small bundle of dried peas to a household with a sick child. Another woman borrows a shawl for her mother. A boy is sent to check on an old widow whose smoke has not risen by midday. Not every community is kind all the time. People can be selfish, tired, suspicious, and harsh. But mutual aid is not decorative. It is a survival tool. Today you help. Tomorrow you may need help. The church too watches over fragile bodies. Baptism matters urgently for infants. Prayers for the sick are common. Burial grounds remind everyone that winter has taken many before. Yet church life also offers support through ritual charity and obligation. Almsgiving, especially around feast days, can help the poorest, though never enough to erase need. The vulnerable remain visible because the village is small. Visibility can bring care. It can also bring judgment. Both are very human. As evening comes, the child's crying fades into sleep. The mother keeps a hand on the small back, feeling each breath. The older man hums a tune that may be a lullaby or a half-remembered drinking song made respectable by low volume. The firelight softens his face. The children who played outside now lean against each other, spent and warm at last. One still has ice in the hem of a tunic slowly melting into the straw. You sit quietly and feel the layered tenderness of the room. It is not sentimental. It smells of smoke, illness, wool broth and tired people. It has rough hands and sharp words and too little food. But it also has vigilance. Someone always listening. Someone always tucking cloth around a foot. Someone always checking the fire, the child, the elder, the door. In this winter world, the fragile are not separate from survival. They are the reason survival matters. To keep a baby breathing through the cold, to help an elder reach one more spring, to teach a child how to carry kindling and still laugh on the ice. These are not small things. They are the heart of the household. Outside, snow settles over the village again, covering tracks, roofs, graves and fields. Inside, the child sleeps, the old woman watches the embers, and the family gathers close enough that warmth passes from body to body without anyone naming it. And you understand with a softness that surprises you that medieval winter is endured not only by the strong, but for the vulnerable, whose quiet breathing in the dark becomes the most precious sound in the room. Before the sky lightens, the women are already awake. You hear them before you see them moving through the dark with the soft certainty of people who know the room by memory. A pot lid lifts. A child is shifted. Cloth rustles. Embers are coaxed until they glow red beneath ash. The first flame rises small and gold, and the day begins not with a grand announcement but with hands finding work. If you have imagined medieval winter as men outside and women inside, the picture is not entirely wrong, but it is far too simple. The inside is not a place of idleness. It is a workshop, nursery, sick room, kitchen, storehouse, dairy, brewery, laundry, corner, sewing room and command centre, all packed into smoky space with questionable ventilation and a pig making comments nearby. The household survives because someone is constantly noticing what must be done next. A central reality of medieval domestic life is that women's labour sustained the household economy through food preparation, brewing, textile production, childcare, nursing, animal care, preservation, cleaning, and countless tasks that rarely appear as heroic in chronicles but made daily survival possible. The sword gets the statue. The spindle keeps everyone clothed. History can be rude like that. You sit near the hearth and watch spinning begin. The distaff holds prepared fibres, perhaps wool or flax. The spindle turns, drops twists, gathers thread. The motion seems gentle until you understand the scale of it. Thread is slow, cloth is hungry. Every garment, blanket, sheet, hood, wrap and patch begins with fibre drawn through fingers, twisted again and again into something strong enough to weave. Winter evenings are full of this work, and so are mornings, and so are all the little pauses between everything else. The woman spinning does not stare dramatically into the fire like a painting. She talks, she listens, she watches the child near the door, she notices the pot beginning to stick. She tells a younger girl to move the bowl before the dog reaches it. Her spindle never stops for long. Multitasking is not a modern invention. Medieval women have been quietly carrying that burden for centuries without a productivity app congratulating them. Nearby brewing waits. Matters, as you already know from your smoky morning cup and your rapidly declining standards. In many households, brewing is women's work, though commercial brewing in towns could involve men and women in different ways. Grain must be malted, mashed, boiled, or steeped, depending on method, flavoured with herbs or hops in later and regional contexts, strained, cooled, and watched. If it spoils, the household loses drink and grain. If it succeeds, everyone benefits. The smell of brewing is warm, sour, grainy, and oddly comforting. Steam beads on the low beams. A child asks whether the ale will be ready soon. The answer is no, delivered in the universal tone of an adult who has answered many questions before sunrise. The child accepts this for 3 breaths, then asks something else. Thus civilization continues. An unusual little detail appears in the herb bundle used for flavouring or medicine. Before hops became widely dominant in many areas, ale could be flavoured with mixtures known as groot, containing herbs that varied by region and availability. Some blends may have included bog myrtle, yarrow, rosemary, or other plants. This means your medieval drink might taste like a garden, a swamp, a remedy, or a dare, depending on who brewed it. Textile work fills the rest of the day. Mending is constant. A torn sleeve is not just untidy. It is a leak in the body's shelter. Hose must be darned, blankets patched, children's clothing let out or cut down. Linen washed when possible, though winter makes washing unpleasant enough to test anyone's devotion to cleanliness. Water must be carried heated, used carefully. Wet cloth must dry near smoke and fire without scorching. A domestic miracle really, if anything, smells even moderately acceptable afterward. There is continued disagreement among historians over how much economic authority ordinary medieval women held within households, since laws, customs, property rights, marital status, and local practice differed widely. Some women brewed for sale, managed shops, inherited land, paid taxes, hired labour, or appeared in court. Others worked under a tighter male control. The evidence resists one tidy answer, which is inconvenient for anyone craving simplicity but excellent for truth. You see authority in small gestures. The woman of the house decides how much grain can be used today. She tells one child to fetch kindling, and another to stay inside because the cough has returned. She knows which neighbour can lend a pot who owes a favour, which hen is failing, which blanket must be saved for the elder tonight. She may not sit at a lord's council, but within these walls her judgment holds the winter together. Pregnancy and childbirth add another layer of danger. A pregnant woman in winter must work if she can rest if she must, and hope the body endures. Birth in a cold, smoky room with limited tools and uncertain outcomes is frightening, though surrounded by female knowledge. Midwives, mothers, neighbours, and older women gather when labour begins. They bring experience, prayers, warmed cloth herbs, and calm voices when calm is possible. Men may hover nearby, useless in that timeless way people become when the most important event in the house does not require their commentary. Nursing a baby in winter is its own labour. The infant must be kept warm, fed clean enough, watched for fever, protected from draughts and soothed while the mother continues other tasks. A baby's cry can interrupt spinning, brewing, cooking, and sleep, which means the day is woven around small hunger. Older girls often help carrying younger siblings, rocking cradles, learning care by doing it long before anyone names it education. You follow the women to tend animals near the byre. Their work crosses the boundary between inside and outside constantly. Chickens need feeding. A cow may need milking if still giving milk. Bedding needs turning. Eggs must be found before they crack or freeze. The yard is slick, the air bitter, and yet the tasks are done with swift competence. The idea that domestic work is light work dissolves somewhere between the frozen bucket and the annoyed hen. Back indoors, food preparation resumes. The pot is stretched again, a handful of dried peas, some greens if any remain. A bone added for flavour, then removed and saved, because even bones seem to have careers here. Bread is checked. The grain store is measured by eye and memory. The woman knows how much remains perhaps better than anyone. Her mind carries an invisible ledger of flour ale. Salt fuel cloth favours illnesses, debts and tempers. There is also emotional labour, though no one calls it that. She smooths quarrels before they grow sharp. She notices the old man's silence. She distracts hungry children. She scolds comforts, negotiates, remembers feast days, prepares for church, and keeps shame away from poverty when guests arrive. Winter crowds everyone together, and someone must manage not only things, but moods. A smoky room can become warmer or colder depending on the voice that rules it. In the afternoon, several women gather near one hearth to spin and mend together. The room changes when they speak among themselves. Stories unfold. A neighbour's daughter may marry. A midwife complains about being called too late. Someone mocks a man who claimed he could predict snow by his elbow, and then slipped in a mud before the first flake. Laughter rises low and brief like sparks. This too is survival. Shared work becomes shared endurance. You notice how information travels through women's networks. Who is sick? Who needs broth? Which household has spare flax? Whose cow may calve early? Which widow has not been seen at the well? These details matter. The village is held together not only by lordship and church bells, but by talk beside the hearth, by women noticing absence, hunger, pregnancy, bruised feelings and weak fires. As evening returns, the spindle still turns, the fire lowers, the children lean into sleep. The day's visible results seem modest, a mended sleeve, a little thread ale beginning to ferment a pot. Cleaned and elder fed, a baby soothed. But these small results are deceptive. They are the stitches holding the whole winter shut. You sit in the dim room listening to the soft pull of fibre and the murmur of women's voices. Outside, the cold presses against the walls. Inside, hands keep moving. They have to. If they stop, clothing fails, food fails, care fails, rhythm fails. And as the last thread winds onto the spindle, you understand that medieval winter does not survive on strength alone. It survives on attention, patient skill, and the quiet authority of women whose work is everywhere, even when history forgets to look directly at it. The night arrives early enough to feel personal. By late afternoon, the sky has already thickened into blue-grey shadow, and the village begins folding itself inward. Doors are barred. Animals are shut away. Tools are leaned against walls where hands can find them in the dark. Smoke lowers over the roofs. Beyond the last cottages, the fields disappear into a whiteness that seems less like weather and more like a warning. Inside the house, the fire becomes the centre of the world again. Its light moves over faces, rafters, pots, folded cloth, sleeping children, and the old woman's hands as she twists thread in her lap. Outside, wind combs through the thatch. It makes the walls creak and the door leather flutter softly. Every sound beyond the threshold grows larger because no one can see its cause. This is when stories come. Not cheerful stories first, of course. That would be too merciful. Someone mentions a wolf seen near the upper pasture. Someone else says it was probably a dog. A third person, older and therefore harder to challenge, says dogs do not leave tracks like that. The children go very still. You also go still, but in a dignified adult way, obviously. A firm piece of historical context is that medieval people lived in a world where Christian belief, local folklore, seasonal custom and practical observation often overlapped. Spirits, saints, demons, weather signs, charms, ghosts, omens, and holy protections could all belong to the same mental landscape, especially during long dark months when fear had plenty of room to stretch. The old woman begins a tale about a traveller who followed a light across a frozen marsh, and was found at dawn standing waist-deep in reeds alive but speechless. Was it a spirit? A trick of moonlight? A lantern carried by someone with questionable hobbies? The story does not say. That is its power. It leaves the dark outside just uncertain enough. You listen as the fire cracks softly. Smoke gathers above. The room smells of tallow-damp wool broth and winter bodies. A child asks whether ghosts feel cold. No one answers immediately, which is frankly unhelpful. Then a man says ghosts probably feel drafts like everyone else, and the child laughs, tension loosening just a little. There is an odd belief whispered about the threshold. Some households place iron near doors or cradles, or hang certain herbs or mark signs for protection. Iron is often thought to repel harmful forces in many European folk traditions, while plants like rowan vervain or elder carry their own reputations depending on region. Whether the danger is spirit, witch, illness, or bad luck, the gesture says the same thing. This house is guarded. Please bother someone else. Academic opinion remains unsettled over how seriously ordinary villagers believed every supernatural tale compared with using them as entertainment moral teaching, social warning, or seasonal drama. One person may fear the ghost in a story, another may enjoy frightening children, a third may understand the tale as a warning not to cross marshland after dark, which is honestly excellent advice even without ghosts. The long nights do something to the mind. In summer, the body falls into bed exhausted by daylight labour. In winter, fatigue remains, but darkness gives more space for memory. Worries become louder. Did the grain chest seem lower? Is the cow coughing? Will the road stay passable? Did the old widow have smoke from her roof today? Why did the dog bark at nothing near the hedge? You hear a sound outside. Everyone hears it. A scrape, perhaps, or snow sliding from the roof, or something moving against the wall. The conversation pauses so completely that the fire seems embarrassed to continue. The dog lifts its head. The old woman narrows her eyes. You hold your breath, because apparently you have become part of this household's nervous system. Another scrape, then a soft bleat from the byre. Someone exhales. Sheep, probably sheep. The man rises anyway, takes a lamp and steps toward the door. Cold rushes in when he opens it sharp as a blade. For a moment you see the yard under moonlight pale and still tracks crossing the snow like writing. Then the door closes behind him. The room waits. This waiting is its own kind of winter labour. The women keep their hands busy but slower now. The children whisper. The fire bends in the draught. The man returns after a few minutes, shoulders powdered with snow, saying a sheep kicked loose a board. Nothing more. Everyone relaxes, and then, because humans are wonderfully foolish, someone begins another frightening story. This one is about wolves. The wolf in medieval imagination is not only an animal. It is hunger with teeth, wilderness with breath, the opposite of the hearth. Real wolves could threaten livestock, and in desperate conditions, people, especially children or isolated travellers. But stories make them larger, cleverer, almost moral. The wolf becomes a test of boundaries. Stay near the village, guard the flock, do not wander where the light fails. You imagine the forest road again, the black branches, the hidden stream, the way every sound seemed to step closer. Folklore does not grow from nothing. It grows where practical danger and imagination share a blanket. Dreams matter too. In the deep winter, people may read meaning into dreams, especially before feast days or during illness. A dead relative appearing in sleep may be a comfort, a warning, or simply grief wearing a familiar face. A dream of fire might mean danger, blessing fever, or that you fell asleep too close to the hearth, which is the less mystical but still important option. The old woman tells of weather omens next. Red sky at certain times, birds flying low, cattle restless before snow, a ring around the moon, smoke that sinks instead of rising. Some of these observations have practical roots: air pressure, moisture, animal behaviour, wind. But they travel as sayings, rhymes, inherited fragments. In a world without printed forecasts, memories the weather service, and grandmothers are the app. The children are sent to sleep though their eyes remain open. The stories have done their work too well. One child asks if a charm can stop wolves. The answer is that a locked door, a good dog, and not wandering off are better. This is perhaps the most medieval sentence you have heard all week, where magic and practicality politely share a bench. Near the hearth someone murmurs a prayer. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a small crossing of the self before sleep, a request that the night pass safely. Christian prayer and folk protection sit close together here. A saint may be invoked against illness. A charm may be tied near a cradle. A candle may burn before an image. People do not always separate categories as cleanly as later scholars would like. Fear is flexible. So is hope. You begin to feel the drowsy pull of the fire. The room softens, the old woman's voice lowers. Another tale begins slower now about a white hare seen near a graveyard, or a woman who heard bells under a frozen lake, or a dead man who returned only to ask that his debts be paid. Medieval ghosts are often very concerned with unresolved business. Even the afterlife, it seems, has administration. The wind presses again at the door, but now it sounds less threatening, folded into the rhythm of speech. The stories have not removed fear. They've shaped it. They've given it faces, rules, warnings, jokes, and endings. That is what people do with darkness. They narrate it until it becomes survivable. Outside the village lies beneath snow and silence. Beyond the fields, the forest waits with its animals, branches, spirits, and perfectly ordinary hazards that become less ordinary after midnight. Inside, the household breathes together. The fire lowers, shadows climb the walls. You close your eyes, still hearing the old woman's voice, soft as ash, telling of lights over marshes and bells beneath ice. You understand now that winter's long nights are not empty. They are crowded with memory, fear, faith, imagination, and the ancient human need to make the dark answer back. The knock comes just after the morning meal. It is not loud, but it changes the room at once. The woman by the hearth pauses with the ladle in her hand. The man repairing a strap looks toward the door. Even the children seem to understand that some knocks belong to neighbours, some to kin, and some to authority. This one has the stiff little rhythm of business. A village official stands outside, cloak dusted with frost face red from the cold. Perhaps he's the reeve, perhaps another man acting on behalf of the Lord, depending on local custom. He's not necessarily cruel. That is what makes him more realistic and in some ways more annoying. He's a familiar man doing a familiar duty, carrying demands that did not melt away just because the weather turned vicious. You follow the household toward the manor court later that day, boots sliding on frozen ruts. The church bell marks the hour. Smoke rises from cottage roofs behind you. Ahead, the manor buildings sit firm against the grey sky, and suddenly the warmth you saw there earlier feels less like comfort and more like leverage. A core feature of medieval village life is that many peasants owed rents, dues, labour services, or fees to a lord, especially in manorial systems, though the exact obligations varied widely by region, legal status, period, and personal arrangement. Some paid in money, some in grain, hen's eggs, work days, or a mixture of all these. Winter did not cancel the relationship. It often made it harder to bear. The court gathers in a cold room or sheltered space near the manor. People stand in cloaks, shifting from foot to foot, breath rising as they wait. The lord may not be present. A steward or bailiff may preside. Names are called, disputes are heard, fines are recorded. Land transfers, inheritance matters, unpaid dues, broken fences, stray animals, brewing offences, small thefts and quarrels pass through this formal village machinery. You hear a man fined because his pig wandered into someone else's plot. The pig notably is absent and therefore escapes public shame. Another villager owes a small payment connected to the mill. Someone has failed to repair a boundary ditch. Someone else is accused of taking wood from land where rights are restricted. These matters sound petty until you remember that in winter, a pig, a ditch, a handful of wood, or access to a mill can shape survival. There is a peculiar legal detail in the murmurs around you. In some places, villagers could be fined for baking or brewing outside the Lord's approved facilities, or for selling ale that failed local measures. Ale tasters existed in many communities to test quality and pricing. Imagine making a weak batch of ale during a freezing month and then being officially judged for it. Medieval life really does find ways to turn disappointment into paperwork. Writers of rural history still differ on whether manorial courts functioned mainly as instruments of lordly control or as practical local institutions that villagers also used for their own disputes. Standing in the cold, you can see both. The court enforces hierarchy, yes. It extracts fines, confirms obligations, reminds everyone who holds power. But villagers also bring complaints, settle, conflicts defend customs, and use the system because disorder can be even worse than procedure. Authority is rarely one simple thing. The household you have been staying with owes rent soon. The amount is not dramatic in a tale, perhaps a measure of grain, a few coins a hen, a service owed when called. But in winter, small obligations become large because everything is already counted. A hen given to the Lord is not an egg tomorrow. Grain paid out is not porridge later. Coin spent on rent is coin not spent on salt thread or a replacement tool. You feel the arithmetic again sharp and cold. Labour duties may be lighter in the frozen months than during ploughing or harvest, but other obligations remain. Roads may need repair, hedges may need attention, wood may be carted, the manor's animals may require care. When the Lord demands work, the peasant gives time, and time is also food, because every hour away from household tasks leaves something undone. No tax arrives alone, it brings a shadow. Forest law adds another layer. You walk past woodland on the way back, its branches black against the snow, and think of all that fuel standing so near. Depending on the region, rights to gather firewood, graze animals, cut timber, or hunt could be strictly controlled. Common rights might allow certain uses, but boundaries mattered. Taking more than permitted could lead to fines. Hunger and cold do not always respect legal categories, but courts often do. This is where survival becomes political in the most ordinary sense. Who has rights? Who has access? Who knows the steward? Who can delay payment? Who is kin to lend grain? Who can argue custom in court? Who is too poor, too new, too widowed, too disliked? Winter exposes the social map. It shows which households have cushions and which live directly against the wall. At the court, a widow steps forward. Her husband died before Martinmas, and now there is discussion of land use and whether her son is old enough to take on obligations. Voices remain formal, but the stakes are intimate. A strip of land is not abstract property. It is bred status security, a place in the village. Without recognised rights, a household can slide quickly toward dependence. The clerk, if one is present, writes with careful strokes. The ink is dark. The parchment or roll holds names that might outlast the people speaking. You imagine future historians reading such records, seeing fines, rents, livestock, broken customs and transfers, then trying to reconstruct breath-cold feet, worry, pride and resentment from a few tidy lines. Good luck to them. The documents know the amount owed, but not always the knot in the stomach. Back at the cottage, the conversation stays low. The family calculates what can be paid, what can be delayed, whether a neighbour might exchange labour for grain, whether the market can help, whether selling an animal would hurt more now or later. No one says the Lord is evil in a grand theatrical way. The system simply stands there old and heavy, asking for its share. You notice how law enters the body. Shoulders tighten when officials arrive. Voices soften near manor walls. Children learn early which fields may be crossed, which woods are dangerous in the legal sense, which men carry authority, which debts are whispered about after dark. The village is not lawless. It is densely ordered, and order can protect or press down depending on where you stand. Still, peasants are not powerless shadows. They remember customs. They appear in court. They complain. They hide things, sometimes no doubt, because human beings did not wait for modernity to discover creative accounting. They negotiate, cooperate, resist, quietly use kin networks, appeal to tradition and depend on one another. The medieval poor are vulnerable but not blank. Evening comes with a thin meal. The pot is stirred and the woman adds less grain than yesterday. Not much less. Just enough that you notice if you're watching. The payment due has already entered the food. That is how obligation works here. It moves from court roll to grain chest to bowl. The fire is lower too, though perhaps that is your imagination. Outside the manor, roofline is hidden by darkness, but you know it is there. The village sleeps beneath its authority as surely as beneath the weather. Winter presses from the sky. Law presses from the land. You sit close to the hearth, feeling the familiar smoke in your eyes, and understand that medieval survival is not only a battle against cold, hunger, illness, and distance. It is also a negotiation with power. To live through winter, you must satisfy the body, the animals, the saints, the neighbours, and the Lord's account book. And as the household settles into uneasy quiet, the embers glow like tiny red coins under ash, reminding you that every warmth has a cost, and every cost must somehow be paid. The first sign of trouble is not a trumpet. It is a rumour brought in with wet boots. A man arrives from the road near dusk, his cloak stiff with frozen rain, his face grey from cold and haste. He does not sit before speaking. He says soldiers were seen 2 villages east moving slowly, taking fodder, asking for bread, paying with promises which everyone understands to be the thinnest kind of coin. The room becomes very still. Even the children know the difference between a story about wolves and news about armed men. Winter war does not always look like grand banners on a shining field. More often, for people like you, it looks like strangers entering barns, animals led away grain, demanded fences broken for fuel, and the sickening knowledge that what took months to store can vanish in an hour. A widely recognised fact is that medieval warfare often burdened civilians through requisition raiding. Billeting taxation forced labour and damage to crops or stores. Armies needed food, animals, carts, firewood and shelter. In winter, when supplies were already tight, even a small group of armed men could become a disaster for a rural household. You feel that fact in the way the woman glances toward the grain chest. The man of the house looks toward the buyer. The older woman crosses herself once, not theatrically, but quickly, as if sealing a crack in the air. Someone asks whose soldiers they are. The traveller shrugs. That answer is not comforting. In a bad year, the difference between friend and enemy may matter less than the fact that both are hungry. The village begins to prepare in the only ways it can. Not with heroic speeches, with concealment. A sack of grain is moved, tools are brought inside, a pig is shifted to a less obvious pen, though the pig loudly objects to being saved. A neighbour takes 2 hens under her cloak, and the hens seem deeply opposed to secrecy as a concept. Children are told not to mention stores animals or where anything has been hidden. Naturally, this guarantees at least one child will look guilty near a stranger. The cold outside deepens. Snow begins again, covering tracks almost as soon as they form. For a moment, winter seems protective. Bad roads slow armies. Frozen rivers can block movement, or sometimes make movement easier if ice holds. Snow can hide a village lane, but it can also reveal footprints. Weather is not on anyone's side. It is merely present, making every plan worse. A strange little belief circulates among the villagers as fear rises. Some say that hanging blessed candles near the door may keep violent men away. Others trust iron dogs, hidden stores, or simply appearing poorer than they are, which is difficult when everyone is already extremely convincing in that role. One old man says soldiers hate entering a house with a sick child because illness follows them. No one knows if this is true, but a coughing child is suddenly given a very public position near the hearth. Medieval strategy can be creative. Military historians continue to debate how often winter actually reduced violence compared with merely changing its form. Campaigning could slow because roads fodder, and supply lines became difficult, yet raids, sieges, garrison demands, and opportunistic plunder might continue precisely because armies needed resources. Peaceful snow in a chronicle margin does not mean peaceful snow in a barnyard. The next day the soldiers come. Not many, perhaps a dozen. Enough. They enter the village in a line of dark shapes, cloaks, wet boots, filthy weapons visible. Their horses steam in the cold. One animal limps. A man with a scar across his cheek speaks to the reeve, who bows just enough to show caution without surrendering all dignity. The soldiers say they need bread, ale, hay, and a place to sleep. They say payment will be arranged. They say this with the confidence of men who are armed and tired. You stand near the cottage door watching the village shrink into obedience. People bring out what they must: a measure of oats, a bundle of hay, a loaf, a jug. Nothing is given freely, but everything is offered with careful hands. Resistance might save a sack and cost a life. Compliance might preserve peace and empty the winter stores. There is no clean choice. One soldier steps into the house. He's younger than you expected. His cheeks are red from wind, his beard patchy, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. He smells of wet leather horse sweat and cold iron. He looks around the room, not cruelly at first, simply hungrily. That may be worse. Need can be as dangerous as malice. The woman offers ale. The man of the house stands nearby quiet. The soldier notices the pot. He notices the blankets. He notices everything because soldiers learn to notice. A second man appears behind him and asks about fodder. The children stare. The older woman coughs with excellent timing. For a moment no one moves. Then a hen clucks from somewhere it should not be. The room freezes. The soldier looks toward the sound. The woman laughs softly and says the creature is half dead and lays nothing. The hen, apparently committed to ruining diplomacy, clucks again with robust health. The soldier's mouth twitches. Not quite a smile, not quite mercy. He leaves it. Perhaps he's tired. Perhaps he has a mother with hens. Perhaps he simply does not want to carry a furious bird through snow. History sometimes turns on very small mercies. Elsewhere another household is less lucky. A stack of hay is taken. A pig is driven away squealing. The sound follows you long after it disappears. Not gore, not battle, just loss with a voice. That pig was future meat-fat trade feast survival. Now, it is gone into the grey road beneath armed hands. By evening, several soldiers sleep in the manor outbuildings and 2 in village homes. The hall at the manor is noisy with men eating and warming themselves. The Lord's representatives negotiate, complain, record, perhaps protest. But in the cottages, winter accounts are being rewritten in silence. Hay gone, ale gone, bread gone, a tool missing, a child frightened, a door latch broken. Fear left behind like mud on the floor. You begin to see why war is not only battle. Battle may be far away, sung about by people who are not trampled by its supply needs. For villagers, war arrives as hunger before it arrives as glory. It eats from the grain chest. It sleeps near the fire. It takes the horse needed for ploughing, the ox needed for spring, the cart needed for market, the son needed for labour, the daughter's dowry, the widow's hen. Sieges are another winter shadow. If a castle nearby is held under siege, the countryside may suffer badly. Troops need provisions, defenders need supplies. Surrounding fields and villages become contested resources. A siege in winter can be miserable for both sides, with cold, disease and hunger working alongside arrows and walls. The noble story speaks of banners. The peasant story counts missing sacks. And yet there are times when winter can protect. Deep snow may block raiders. Frozen roads may keep armies in garrison. A lord may prefer to wait for campaigning weather. Villagers may hide stores better under winter routines. Nothing is certain. That is the trouble. The season can be shield or trap silence or warning. The soldiers leave after 2 days. They take the road at first light, their horses moving slowly breath-white. The village watches from doorways. No one cheers. No one curses loudly. The reeve stands with a face like old wood. The snow receives the hoofprints, and soon the falling flakes soften them, as if the road wishes to forget. But the village does not forget. The missing hay is counted. The lost pig is mourned in practical terms. The grain chest is checked again. The pot is thinner that night. A child asks whether the soldiers will come back, and no one answers quickly, because honesty and comfort have stepped into different rooms. You sit by the fire listening to the quieter household. War has passed through without a battle, yet everyone is changed. Winter was already difficult. Now it has help. Outside, the dark fields stretch toward other villages, other roads, other rumours. Somewhere beyond the snow lords argue, kings claim captains, march castles, close their gates, and ordinary people hide hens beneath cloaks while pretending not to be afraid. And as the embers sink low, you understand that medieval winter violence is not always loud. Sometimes it's the silence after hoofbeats fade the space where food used to be, and the knowledge that survival can be stolen by men who may be just as cold and hungry as you are. After the soldiers leave, the village begins counting in a new way, not loudly. No one stands in the lane announcing disaster like a town crier with dramatic training. The counting happens in corners beside bins near buyers under breath. A hand sinks into the grain chest and feels how low the store has fallen. A woman lifts the last side of salted pork and judges its weight with her palm. A man stands before the haystack and stares as if stern attention might make it larger. The pig that was taken is still gone, which is inconsiderate of it, but also very typical of stolen pigs. Winter has not ended. That is the cruel part. You have endured frost-smoke, illness, roads, taxes, animals, holy days and armed men, and still the hardest stretch may lie ahead. The first signs of spring are not food. They are promises. A softer wind does not fill a bowl. A thawing ditch does not bake bread. The earth may loosen, but the harvest remains far away. One important truth about pre-modern rural life is that late winter and early spring could be among the most dangerous times of the year, because stored food ran low before new crops were ready. Later writers often call this the hungry gap, but the experience itself is older than the phrase. It is the season when hope appears in the fields while hunger sharpens inside the house. You feel it in the morning meal. The pottage is thinner. The spoon moves through it too easily. There are fewer beans, less grain, more water. Everyone eats slowly, partly to make the bowl last, partly because no one wants to be the first to finish and face the empty bottom. Bread is cut smaller. The crust is treasured. A child licks a finger and presses it to crumbs on the table. No one scolds. The body changes under this kind of shortage. People move more slowly. Tempers fray, then retreat into silence because arguments also cost strength. Faces seem narrower, cheeks hollow. The older man sleeps more. The child who cried weeks ago is quieter now, which is not always a good sign. The mother watches everyone's bowl while pretending not to. A curious survival practice appears when the women discuss what can be added to food. Dried nettles if gathered earlier. Pounded acorns in some regions, though, they require careful preparation to reduce bitterness. Wild greens as soon as they emerge. Pea meal stretched with bran. In desperate times, people might mix poorer ingredients into bread or pottage, not because they are rustic food influences, but because the alternative is worse. Medieval cuisine contains many dishes invented by necessity with no interest in presentation. Agrarian historians differ over how often ordinary households consumed seed grain during severe shortages. The temptation is obvious. Seed grain sits there edible, silent, almost insulting, but if you eat it, you threaten the next harvest. Some families resisted until the last possible moment. Others may have had no choice. The decision is not merely practical, it is terrifyingly moral. Do you survive today by wounding tomorrow? You see the seed grain set apart in a sack near the wall. It is treated almost like something sacred. Not holy in the church sense perhaps, but heavy with future life. Those kernels are not breakfast. They are the field yet to come. They are summer imagined in dry form. They must be protected from mice, damp hunger and despair, especially despair. Outside, snow recedes in patches. The lane turns from white to brown, then from brown to sludge. Beneath hedges the first green shoots appear. People notice them with the intensity of treasure hunters. Children are sent to gather safe early plants where custom allows. Every region has its knowledge which greens can be eaten, which must be boiled, which are good for the blood, which are for animals, which will make you regret your curiosity. The animals feel the lean edge too. Hay is nearly gone. The cow's ribs show more clearly. Sheep pull at poor fodder. Chickens scratch at thawing ground and find very little. If an animal survived winter, it now must reach pasture. This last stretch can be brutal. You may have kept a beast alive through snow only to lose it before grass returns strongly. Winter apparently enjoys late surprises. Milk, if available, is precious. Eggs may slowly increase as daylight returns, but not fast enough to solve hunger. A single egg can become food for a sick child, a trade item or part of a household calculation, so serious it makes modern brunch look morally unserious. Imagine paying 18 coins for decorative toast while a medieval woman debates one egg like a legal case. The village watches one another more closely now. Who has smoke? Who has borrowed grain? Who is selling tools? Who has stopped attending church? Poverty becomes visible in steps, clothing and silence. But help still passes hand to hand. A bowl of broth, a loan of meal, a promise of labour after thaw, a little food sent to a widow, not enough to make a fairy tale, but enough sometimes to keep a person inside the circle of the living. There is shame too. Need can be hard to admit. A household might hide hunger as carefully as it hides grain from soldiers. Pride survives even when bread does not. You begin to understand how social life can both save and wound. The village can notice your suffering and help. It can also notice your suffering and remember. The church calendar moves toward Lent in many medieval communities, and fasting rules complicate an already difficult season. For the wealthy, fasting can mean fish, almond milk, special dishes, and creative kitchens performing piety with flair. For the poor, it may mean less of what there was already too little of. Religious discipline and material scarcity overlap uneasily. The soul may be willing. The stomach has questions. Still, ritual gives meaning to hunger. People know fasting as a spiritual act, not merely deprivation. They pray, attend services, mark the approach of Easter, and imagine resurrection, while the earth itself looks half dead and half waking. The symbolism is powerful because the body understands it. You're waiting for a life to return in doctrine, in fields, in bowls. One evening the household discusses whether to slaughter a weak animal. Keeping it may waste fodder. Killing it may provide meat now but remove future value. The argument is quiet, practical and sad. The animal breathes in the byre, unaware that its existence has become a meeting. The final decision is delayed until morning because sometimes delay is the last mercy people can afford. Night brings dreams of food, warm bread, thick stew, apples, cheese, meat with fat shining on it. You wake and taste smoke instead. The fire is low. Someone's stomach growls in the dark and another person shifts as if embarrassed on their behalf. Hunger is private, yet in a crowded room nothing stays fully private. As days pass, the thaw continues, mud opens, water runs in ditches. Birds call more loudly. The world seems to be returning, but slowly, so slowly. The first ploughing will take strength. The first planting will require seed. The first green does not erase the last hunger. Spring is not a rescue arriving on horseback. It is labour wearing a gentler sky. You stand at the field's edge and look at the darkening soil. It smells wet mineral alive. Your body, tired and underfed, responds with something like hope. Not joy exactly. Hope is too careful here for joy. But the land is changing. The grip of winter loosens finger by finger. Behind you the village smoke rises thinly into the pale air. Ahead the field waits. Between them is the hungry edge, the narrow crossing where families decide and endure, share, hide, pray, and measure each mouthful against the future. And as you turn back toward the cottage, you understand that surviving medieval winter does not mean reaching the first warm day. It means reaching it with enough grain to plant enough strength to work enough animals to pull, and enough heart left to believe the earth will answer. The thaw arrives like a very tired apology. At first you do not trust it. No one does. A soft wind moves through the village and people glance upward as if the sky might be joking. Snow pulls back from the lane in dirty strips. Icicles drip from thatch. The hard earth loosens into mud so deep and sticky it seems personally determined to remove your shoes. Winter's not vanished. It has simply changed costumes. The sound of the village shifts. Instead of the sharp crack of frozen ground, you hear wet, sucking footsteps, dripping eaves, running ditches, cartwheels groaning in ruts, and hens scratching with renewed ambition. The air smells different too. Not warm yet not truly, but earthy. Damp soil, old straw, thawing manure, wet wool smoke, and the faint green scent of plants beginning to consider existence again. A sound piece of historical context is that spring labour in medieval farming began as soon as weather and soil allowed, with ploughing, sowing, ditch clearing, fence repair, lambing, manuring, and garden work all pressing hard after the winter slowdown. The return of work did not wait until people felt rested. It arrived when the land demanded it. You step into the yard and nearly lose a boot. Mud is everywhere. It sucks at wheels, clings to hems, coats animals, and transforms short walks into moral challenges. After months of freezing, you may have dreamed of thaw as a blessing. It is a blessing, yes, but a slippery one. Frozen roads were dangerous, but at least they held shape. Spring mud is a slow-moving enemy with excellent grip. The fields call people outward again. The household that spent the winter pressed around the hearth now spreads into lanes, barns, gardens, and strips of open land. Tools repaired during the dark months are lifted from storage, harnesses checked. The oxen are brought out thinner than autumn, but alive, which is the important thing. Their breath steams in the cool morning as they lower their heads, patient, massive, and probably more essential than half the people giving opinions nearby. The plough itself looks heavy and awkward, but in skilled hands it becomes the instrument that opens the year. Earth turns in dark bands, wet and rich, releasing a smell that feels almost nourishing by itself. You follow behind for a while, boot-sinking cloak catching on your legs, and quickly discover that ploughing is not a peaceful pastoral activity. It is strain shouting, slipping, guiding, correcting, urging animals forward and trying not to fall face first into the future bread supply. There is a peculiar practice you notice as manure is spread across the fields. Some villagers speak of the right day to begin certain spring tasks, watching saints' days, moon phases, bird calls, soil texture, and inherited sayings. One man insists beans sown under a certain moon grow stronger. Another says the ground matters more than the moon, then immediately checks the sky anyway. People are practical, but practicality often travels with tradition as its chatty companion. Rural historians continue to examine how flexible medieval agricultural calendars really were, because written accounts can make labour look orderly, while weather, local soil, animal strength and hunger likely forced constant adjustment. A manor account might record work days neatly. The field itself does not care about neatness. If rain comes, mud deepens. If frost returns, seed suffers. If oxen weaken, plans slow. The calendar is a suggestion. The season is the manager. In the byre, new life complicates everything. A ewe is close to lambing. She stands restless, shifting in the straw sides, heavy breath quick. The household watches with concern sharpened by hope. Lambs mean future wool meat milk in some systems, growth in the flock. They also mean danger. A weak lamb in cold, damp weather may fail quickly without help. So the women prepare dry, straw-warmed cloth and their own tired patience. When the lamb arrives, it is slick, trembling, and astonishingly small. The ewe turns to clean it. Steam rises faintly in the cold air. A child watches with wide eyes and is told to stand back, then creeps forward anyway because childhood has always had poor boundary discipline. The lamb struggles, collapses, tries again. Everyone waits for that first successful stand as if the whole village has placed a wager with spring. It stands. A tiny victory. Not enough to fill a granary, not enough to solve hunger, but enough to make faces soften. The lamb noses blindly toward milk. The ewe allows it. Someone exhales a prayer. Another says it is a good sign. You want to believe that too. Gardens wake next. Near the cottages, small plots are cleared of winter debris. Women and children pull old stalks, loosen soil patch fences and look for early greens. The kitchen garden matters greatly, providing onions, leeks, cabbages, herbs, beans, peas, and whatever the region and household can manage. These smaller spaces are less dramatic than great fields, but they are close-tended and vital. You help repair a fence damaged by weather and animals. The stakes are uneven, the woven branches rough beneath your hands. A goat watches with the expression of a creature already planning a crime. Fences are not decorative. They keep animals from destroying gardens and fields. One loose section can become a village argument by sunset. As you twist branches into place, you understand why broken fences appear so often in local disputes. Livestock have no respect for legal property. The thaw opens roads again, but not cleanly. Carts sink. Bridges need checking, streams swell with meltwater. Paths become streams and streams become challenges. The village ditch must be cleared so water drains from yards and fields. You join a group scraping mud leaves and debris from a channel. The work is filthy cold and essential. Standing water can rot roots, ruin paths, and make already damp life damper, which seems unnecessary but happens anyway. Food is still thin. That is the part modern imagination tends to rush past. Spring's arrival does not instantly bring abundance. The household continues stretching meals. Early greens are gathered carefully, not greedily, because too much of the wrong plant can cause trouble, and too little of everything is already the theme. Eggs are more frequent now, thank heaven, and hens. Milk may improve if animals recover. But the first real harvest is still distant. You feel weakness in your legs as you work. Winter has left its mark. Everyone moves with a stored tiredness. Yet the village is more animated now. People call across fields. Children run farther. Tools ring. Birds shout from hedges with indecent confidence. The world has colour again, muted but real. Brown soil, green shoots, white lambs, red hands. Grey sky breaking now and then into washed blue. At the manor, demands rise with the season. Work obligations return more strongly. Plough teams may be organised. Seed must be sown, records kept. The Lord's land does not cultivate itself, though perhaps it has considered asking. Peasant households must balance their own strips and gardens with owed labour elsewhere. Spring is possibility, but also pressure. The land opens and everyone must move. By evening you return to the cottage with mud up your legs and aches in places winter had not yet discovered. The fire feels different now, less like the only world, more like a place to return before going out again. Wet clothing steams. Someone speaks about the lamb. Someone else mentions the field was heavier than expected. The old woman says the soil smells ready, then warns that late frost can still come. Hope in medieval spring always wears a cloak. You eat thin pottage brightened with a few early greens. The taste is sharp, fresh, almost shocking after months of stored dullness. Your body notices. The whole room seems to notice. A child asks when there will be more. The answer is soon, perhaps. Soon is not a date, but it is better than no. Night falls later now. Not late exactly, but later enough to feel like mercy. The darkness no longer drops so suddenly. Outside, water runs in the ditches. The animals settle. Somewhere the new lamb calls in a small, uncertain voice, and the ewe answers. You lie down, tired from Thor work, and realise that winter's ending is not a door opening into ease. It is a gate opening onto labour. Mud replaces ice. Urgency replaces waiting. Hunger remains, but now it walks beside hope. The fields are awake, and that means everyone must wake with them. And as you drift towards sleep, the smell of wet earth still clinging to your clothes, you understand that reaching spring is not the end of survival. It is the beginning of earning the next winter's chance. By now you have stopped asking when winter ends. You have learned that seasons do not end in clean lines. They loosen, retreat, return, soften, bite again, and finally give way only after making everyone prove they still belong here. You stand at the edge of the village looking back at the roofs, the church tower, the manor beyond the fields, opening under a pale spring sky, and you understand that survival was never one thing. It was the stored grain, the guarded ember, the patched cloak, the cow kept alive, the neighbour who lent peas, the child who stopped coughing, the hen no soldier noticed, the seed grain nobody ate, the muddy field ready at last. A broad historical truth is that medieval survival depended on community as much as individual toughness. Households mattered, but so did neighbours, kin, parish lordship, markets, shared labour, local custom and mutual obligation. A person alone against winter was terribly exposed. A village could still fail, but it had more hands with which to resist. You remember the first frost when the cold felt like a visitor. Now you know better. It was a ruler, a creditor, a judge. It entered food law, sleep, prayer, clothing, illness, work and fear. It decided how far people travelled, how much they ate where animals slept when wood was burned, who received the thicker blanket and whether a family reached planting time whole. And yet people did reach it. Not always, not everyone. That is important. Some died, some lost children, some sold animals they needed, some entered debt that followed them for years, some left homes, some survived physically but carried grief into spring like a hidden stone. Medieval endurance was not romantic, it was costly, but it was real. You see it in the old woman stepping outside to feel the air. You see it in the mother watching her child chase a hen through mud. You see it in the man checking the oxen, not because he trusts fortune, but because work must begin. You see it in the repaired fence, the rising smoke, the church bell, the thin green in the field. There is a small, strange custom mentioned as people speak of the season past. Some villagers say that if the first swallow is seen flying low, rain will follow, but if it rises high, fair weather is coming. Someone else insists the true sign is the behaviour of frogs. A third person, very confident and probably wrong, claims his knees know better than birds. After all these months, even weather prophecy feels like companionship. Modern historians continue to discuss how far medieval people viewed hardship as normal rather than exceptional, since their writings often frame suffering through religion, custom and duty, rather than personal complaint. But normal does not mean painless. People may expect cold and hunger, yet still dread them. They may accept death as part of life, yet still grieve. They may joke beside the hearth and still fear the next empty bowl. You look toward the manor, remembering its fuller stores and larger fires. Winter was not equal. It never is. Wealth softened it. Rank redirected it. Power drew warmth from other people's labour. Some slept behind curtains while others woke to fetch their fuel. Some tasted spices while others counted beans. Survival then and now is shaped by luck class healthland and the people willing or required to help you. But hardship also revealed skill. The ordinary medieval villager knew things most modern people never need to learn. How to judge hay by smell, how to bank embers under ash, how to stretch pottage without ruining it, how to read a skymend wool save seed. Calm animals remember debts, preserve meat and keep going when comfort had left months ago. Would most of us survive today in that winter? Probably not gracefully. You would miss insulation, you would miss medicine, you would miss clean water, reliable food, warm socks, painless dentistry, weather forecasts, and the sacred modern ritual of complaining while standing beside a functioning thermostat. But perhaps the deeper shock would be social. You would have to depend on others constantly, visibly, humbly. You would need to be useful. You would need to be known. The medieval winter asks an uncomfortable question. What are you when convenience is stripped away? Not as a fantasy challenge, not as a dramatic survival show, but day after day in smoke, mud, hunger and cold. Are you patient, skilled, generous, careful? Can you share a room, a bowl, a fear? Can you laugh when the pig ruins everything? Can you rise before dawn because the animals do not care how tired you are? The village does not answer with words, it answers by continuing. A child carries kindling. A woman turns soil in the garden. A man lifts the plough gear. The old woman watches the sky and says there may be frost again because of course there may be. The church bell rings softer now in the damp air. Smoke climbs upward instead of flattening beneath snow clouds. The world smells of wet earth and returning grass. You take one last look at the cottage. It is small, smoky, crowded and poor by any modern measure. Yet it has held life through darkness. Its walls have heard coughs, prayers, quarrels, stories, lullabies, hunger, laughter, and the quiet breathing of sleepers packed close against the cold. It is not picturesque. It is brave in the most unglamorous way. Survival really meant arriving here with enough left to begin again. Enough grain for the soil, enough strength for the plough, enough animals for work, enough trust for borrowing and lending, enough memory to prepare better next time, enough grief to remember the lost, enough hope to plant anyway. And that may be the most human thing in the whole winter. Not conquest, not comfort, not certainty. Planting anyway. The field opens beneath the blade. Dark soil turns toward the light. Birds call from the hedges. Somewhere behind you the judgmental pig, or perhaps its equally opinionated cousin, grunts as if spring was its idea all along. You smile despite yourself. The cold has not vanished from memory. It remains in the patched sleeves, the thinned faces, the low stores, the stories that will be told next winter when the dark comes early again. But for now the village breathes out. You have reached another spring, and in this quiet turning after smoke and frost, after hunger and bells, after fear in the forest, and warmth by the hearth, you understand that medieval winter was not simply a season to survive. It was a test of belonging where every life depended on hands, habits, neighbours, animals, weather, prayer and luck moving together through the dark. Now the pace slows. The field grows softer in your sight. The voices of the village drift farther away, not gone, just gently fading into the hush after a long story. The smoke rises in a thin blue line. The lamb calls once, then settles. Water runs in the ditch with a small silver sound, patient and clear beneath the evening air. You are no longer cold, not here, not now. The winter remains behind you like a heavy door closing softly. The hearth is safe in memory. The straw no longer scratches. The smoke no longer stings. All that remains is the glow, the low murmur of people resting, the slow breath of animals, and the old comfort of knowing that night can pass. Let the village grow dim at the edges. Let the church bell become only an echo. Let the fields darken under a calm sky. Somewhere seeds sleep beneath the soil, holding tomorrow in silence. You have walked through the hardest months and come gently to the other side. Nothing more is asked of you tonight. The fire is banked, the door is closed, the household is quiet, the world is softening, Rest now with the thought of spring beneath the dark earth waiting patiently warmly surely. Sweet dreams.